If you like the story, you can support the author on Patreon. Link is in the description.
Chapter 201, Stonegate. Liyue, Stonegate. As the bustling transportation hub between the two nations, Stonegate is teeming with life, where one can often see people wearing clothing from different countries. It's not just Liyue and Mondstadt. There are also people from Inazuma, Sumeru, Fontaine, and other countries. They are probably merchants or tourists, which is why they've come to Stonegate, a relatively prosperous transportation hub. After all, this is the last town before Liyue when traveling from Mondstadt and the first town when traveling from Liyue to Mondstadt. Regardless of the direction one travels next, stopping here to rest and replenish supplies is a must. After Nolan and Lumen ran away from the teleport waypoint, they first took a stroll around Stonegate. They had some snacks and drank a bowl of tea at a tea stand. Then they prepared to continue their journey to Liyue Harbor. Following the passers-by, they walked along the dirt road heading towards Liyue Harbor. Their next destination was Dihua Marsh, a wild area but close enough to Stonegate with frequent traffic, likely having inns or something similar. If they could reach it within the day, they wouldn't have to camp outdoors. At this moment, Nolan and his companions noticed a crowd gathered by the roadside, creating quite a commotion. What are they doing there? Should we go take a look? Paimon, hovering in midair, pointed curiously at the scene. She was someone who enjoyed joining in on lively scenes. Nolan and Lumen also became slightly interested, so they approached to see what was going on. Come one, come all, folks. Come and see. Get your fortunes told by a half-immortal, accurate readings for everything. If it's not accurate, you don't have to pay. We do this not for profit but to help people. If you're facing any difficulties, just speak up. A middle-aged man with a grey square hat, a black mustache, and a long beard on his chin was sitting behind a stall, shouting out to the crowd. On either side of him stood two flags, one on the left and one on the right, each bearing the inscription, Lord Emperor's True Disciple. A Wanderer Half-Adepti. Seeing this, Paimon exclaimed in surprise, What? We haven't even reached Liyue Harbor yet, and we've already coincidentally encountered a disciple of the Divine Geo Emperor. Hearing Paimon, Lumen couldn't help but put her hands on her hips and sigh. It was obvious this was a scam, yet Paimon, the fool, believed it. Nolan also nodded in agreement. How could one easily encounter an adept? Moreover, doing fortune-telling so openly in public. Speaking of which, this guy is really daring, actually using the name of the Geo Archon to deceive people. Are you really a half-adepti? Of course, not everyone could see through such a simple scam. For example, an elderly woman with white hair among the onlookers showed a skeptical expression and asked. Yes, we've never heard of the Lord Emperor having any true disciples. A middle-aged woman, dressed in traditional Liyue-style clothing, was clearly doubtful. Their skepticism caused more people to show doubtful expressions. Although many of them were elderly and not well educated, they weren't easily fooled by just anyone. Sigh. The middle-aged man who claimed to be a disciple of the Geo Archon rubbed his long chin beard and smiled gently, shaking his head. You don't understand the details, so I don't blame you for your offense. If you have doubts, then let me tell you the story of how I became a disciple of the Lord Emperor. His confident demeanor seemed to convince the crowd a bit, and out of curiosity, they gestured for him to continue. The middle-aged man with the grey square hat continued to stroke his beard, squinting his eyes and smiling as if he were speaking with insight. That year, I was just a child. There was a flood in Gailai Plains, and the muddy, yellow water submerged my village. Fortunately, it was discovered early, so there were no casualties, but the village's crops were washed away, leaving nothing. At this point, the man paused, wiping the tears from the corners of his eyes. Seeing his dramatic performance, Nolan almost believed him if he hadn't seen such tactics on the internet before. Oh, so sad. If the crops are gone, won't there be no food for the whole year? Right. Paimon, along with some of the elderly onlookers, seemed moved by the man's story, and the crowd grew quieter. Perhaps they had faced similar experiences in the past. Because there was no food, the villagers had no choice but to abandon their young and ignorant children in the wilderness to fend for themselves, and I was one of them. The middle-aged man paused briefly before continuing. What? How could this happen? It's so pitiful, how could young children survive in the wild like that? The onlookers, both old and young, started to discuss fervently. The middle-aged man took note of everyone's reactions with disdain in his eyes, sneering inwardly, "What a bunch of fools. You deserve to be deceived." As a professional scammer, using people's empathy was the most basic tactic he mastered. He continued to feign pity and said, "Sigh, if things had continued like that, me and my fellow villagers might not have survived the first night, and would have been eaten by monsters and beasts." "And then what happened?" a young boy who had come out to play with his grandmother curiously asked. The middle-aged man adjusted his grey square hat and continued to narrate. "Yes, what happened next was just as you imagine. Frightening-looking monsters appeared, intending to devour me and my fellow villagers. And then, a divine dragon, radiating a dazzling golden light, was drawn down by our cries. With 2 gusts of breath from its nostrils, it blew the monsters to dust. Yes, it was our beloved Lord Emperor. A divine dragon. Indeed, it's our Lord Emperor." The young boy's eyes seemed to sparkle with golden light. No one in Liyue dared to impersonate Lord Emperor, so everyone began to believe him a little more. Seeing this, the middle-aged man continued. "Afterwards, Lord Emperor took pity on us, brought us to his training ground, and accepted us as disciples. And among us, I was the most intelligent, which is why I became his true disciple. As for where the training ground is and how to learn the Adeptus arts, I cannot divulge, as it involves Lord Emperor's secrets." "I see, so you really are a true disciple of Lord Emperor, and even after learning, you do fortune-telling for free, choosing to give back to the world. That's truly magnificent." The speaker was a young man in the crowd wearing a red headband, looking somewhat excited. Nolan raised an eyebrow. "Seriously? It's one thing for the elderly and children to be easily deceived, but you're so young and you believe this? Moreover, this storytelling is too forced, not natural at all." End of chapter/volume 3, Jade Chamber starts. Quick question guys. The knowledge about adepts is known to everyone? I mean normal people at least know they exist, right? Note. Lord Emperor equals Archon equals Divine Dragon, it's not hard to guess, I guess smiling face with open mouth and cold sweat. Also, as the old arc is now ended, I want to take a short break, and focus on my new Pokemon story. See ya soon. Chapter 202, The Charlatan. You're right to trust this adepti. Your chance to change your destiny comes only once. Tell me, what would you like me to divine for you? The middle-aged man, stroking his beard with a self-satisfied expression, asked the young man wearing the headband. Okay. If possible, could the great Lord Half-Adepti tell me how I can become wealthy? The young man nodded eagerly, his excitement palpable. The rest of the onlookers, including Paimon, watched with great curiosity, waiting to see what the self-proclaimed Half-Adepti would say. It's a simple matter. The middle-aged man with the square hat nodded, indicating no problem. He then began to scrutinize the young man with the headband. After about 10 seconds, he smiled and said, using the art of face reading, I have already observed your destiny and discovered where your opportunity lies. Please speak, Lord Half-Adeptus. The young man's eyes sparkled with anticipation. All right, I won't keep you in suspense, the self-proclaimed Half-Adepti began thoughtfully. As everyone knows, our Lord Emperor is not only the Archon but also holds titles such as the Warrior God and the God of History, etc. One of his titles is the God of Wealth. As the God of Wealth, he naturally possesses the art of treasure hunting. Although your opportunity would not have manifested in your fate, this Half-Adeptus, as a true disciple of the Lord Emperor, has decided to use his treasure hunting art to reveal your fortune. Please do. The young man nodded fervently. The self-proclaimed adepti rummaged through his stall and pulled out a yellowed piece of paper. He then began to draw what looked like a talisman, each stroke precise and solemn, creating an air of authenticity. It didn't take long. A talisman with black characters on a yellow background was completed. He flicked it directly towards the young man. As it struck the young man, the talisman suddenly burst into flames on its own in midair with a whoosh, burning out completely, leaving a few ashes that fell precisely onto the young man. This is the Void Ignition Talisman. It's the legendary technique of the Adeptus! Exclaimed a chubby man excitedly, standing a few seats to the right of Nolan and the others. What? This is the technique of the Adeptus! The crowd buzzed with excitement. The use of talismans seemed to align perfectly with their imaginations of an Adeptus practitioner's methods. Ah, I can feel it. I'm going to make a fortune. Haha, I'm going to be rich. The young man, upon the talisman's ashes landing on him, suddenly appeared to have an epiphany and began to dance around in joy. Not long after, the young man calmed down, took a deep breath, and said to the self-proclaimed Adepti. Thank you so much, Lord Half-Adeptus. Just now, I had a vision in my mind of a treasure worth at least 10 million mora. Is this my opportunity? It's unbelievable. That's right. Opportunity waits for no one. Go quickly and retrieve it. Let everyone see that this Adepti is not a fraud, the middle-aged man said with a relaxed wave of his hand. All right, all right. By the way, how much do I owe you for this fortune-telling, Lord Half-Adeptus? The young man, seemingly not overwhelmed by the thought of a treasure worth millions, appeared genuinely grateful. Mora is but a mundane item of little use to an immortal like me. However, to maintain the spirit of gratitude among people, I will symbolically charge a fee of 100,000 mora, the middle-aged man said, one hand tucked behind his grey robe and the other stroking his beard. What? You help me find a treasure worth 10 million and only charge 100,000? That's incredibly generous. The young man exclaimed in surprise. He then cheerfully handed over a bag of mora to the self-proclaimed Adepti and rushed off, seemingly eager to find his fortune. Wow, could they be any more awkward? Nolan muttered. Admiring their audacity to scam under the name of the Geo Archon, Nolan also acknowledged their courage. If the Archon ever found out, they'd surely taste the wrath of Planet Befall. However, perhaps it was this very audacity that made people, especially the elderly, believe in them. Could he really be an Adepti? And how did he use those talismans? Paimon exclaimed in surprise. I didn't sense any elemental energy fluctuation. It was probably done with gunpowder or something similar, maybe like the principle behind fire-quenching arrows, Lumen said, arms crossed under her chest, a thoughtful expression on her fair face. Though she couldn't quite figure out the exact mechanism. All right, who's next to seek guidance from this great half-adeptus? To preserve the sanctity of the techniques bestowed upon me by the Lord Emperor, there are limited slots per day. If you want your fortune told, hurry up while there's still time. The middle-aged man with the grey hat scanned the growing crowd. Who wants to be next? He asked. Me. Great Adeptus, let me go first. The round-faced man with a big belly stepped forward eagerly. I want to know where my fortune lies. This is not difficult, the middle-aged man replied, repeating the same steps as before. The round-faced man ran off excitedly, convinced of his fortune. With 2 examples now, the remaining onlookers seemed more intrigued but still hesitant. Many of them, being older, had few desires left, and the fee of 100,000 mora was a significant amount for them. Then, a richly dressed and handsome young boy suddenly spoke up, Lord Half-Adeptus, I want to learn your Adepti techniques, and I'm willing to pay any amount of mora. Ha! Finally, someone falls for it, the middle-aged man thought as he looked at the boy, feeling relieved. Yes, the previous 2 were his accomplices. All the divination and Adepti techniques were fake. If anyone else wanted to try, the price of 100,000 mora was enough to deter them. All these efforts were specifically aimed at this young boy. Zhao Bing, the son of the leader of the Five-Blade Gate. He had never been interested in martial arts since childhood but loved cultivating immortality. But where could a mortal learn the art of immortality? The leader of the Five-Blade Gate, Zhao Kuo, doted on his son greatly and publicly sought methods of cultivating immortality, promising rich rewards. This caused a stir among many martial artists, creating a craze for seeking immortality in Liyue. As for why the Five-Blade Gate had such great influence? Of course, it was because they operated transport in Stonegate, a vital transportation hub between the 2 nations, making them the most prosperous private transport service provider. According to estimates by the Informed, the Five Blades Gate controlled at least 10% of the transport market in Stonegate. There was even a trend of expanding outward. This meant they were very, very wealthy. Promising a rich reward was certainly not an empty promise, but finding the art of immortality was not easy, and months had passed without any progress. During these days, Chushike and his 2 companions had been searching in the deep forests for the art of immortality. Apart from finding nothing, they had no income. It was a complete waste of several months. How could they endure this? They found the Five Blades Gate and demanded payment for the months they had spent searching for the art of immortality, not asking for much, just 3 million mora. But obviously, the Five Blades Gate refused. Chapter 203, kidnapping. There were so many people searching for the immortal arts for the Five Blades Gate. If all of them demanded millions, the gate would go bankrupt on the spot. Unable to get the money, Chushike and his companions had no choice but to leave. After all, they couldn't force them to pay up. But after that day, the more they thought about it, the angrier they got, losing sleep over it. So, the clever Chushike came up with a plan. Since you want to learn immortality, I'll become an immortal to teach you. Once I successfully kidnap this kid, there's no need to waste time looking for the immortal arts. I'll just ask his father, Zhao Kuo, directly. Oh? You want to learn my immortal adeptus techniques? Chushike looked at the young boy with a serious expression. Yes. The boy, Zhao Bing, responded. He had grown up listening to stories about the Lord Emperor and wanted to become someone like him. Hence, he was very interested in adeptus arts. Today, unexpectedly encountering someone who claimed to be a true disciple of the Lord Emperor, he felt an odd mixture of surprise and skepticism, but also a flicker of hope that made him stay and watch to see if this person was genuine or not. Seeing the man's stories, which seemed like first-hand experiences, and witnessing the use of talismans, which only adeptus could wield, convinced Zhao Bing that this was indeed a true disciple of the Lord Emperor. There was no mistake. He didn't want to miss this chance, so he asked the great half-adeptus to teach him the immortal arts of adeptus. Haha, I see the determination in your eyes. I can teach you the way of immortality, and I won't even charge you, but you must pass my test, Chushike said with a slight smirk, telling himself to stay focused and not mess up now. Any test will do, just tell me. I can pass it. Zhao Bing said, clenching his fists. This great half-adeptus, seeing my determination, isn't charging me. As expected of a true disciple of the Lord Emperor, he must be looking for a successor. He doesn't want the adeptus arts he learned from the Lord Emperor to be lost. I, Zhao Bing, am 14 years old and have been unwaveringly seeking these immortal arts for 4 years. Have I finally gained the favor of an immortal today? Humph, the test is simple. Although I see your determination, to practice the adeptus arts, you must live in seclusion and not be disturbed by worldly affairs. So, you must show me that you have the perseverance to endure a solitary life in the deep mountains. Only then can I teach you the immortal arts of adeptus, Chushike said, stroking his long black beard. All right, great half-adepti, what do I need to do? Zhao Bing agreed without hesitation. It's simple. You must go with me to the wilds of Daihua Marsh and live on the morning dew and evening clouds for a few days. Then I will see if you have the talent for immortality, Chushike said with a smile. Once you follow me, you'll be at my mercy. Hee, kid, what's the point of a young master trying to become an immortal? Zhao Bing's eyes lit up, thinking that this was exactly how immortal training should be. Just as he was about to agree, his attendant, who had been standing beside him, spoke up anxiously. No, young master. The wilderness is full of wild beasts and many monsters. How can you live in such a place? If immortals can do it, why can't I? How else will I become an immortal? Zhao Bing, though mild-mannered, could be as stubborn as an ox when he set his mind on something, much like his pursuit of the path to become an immortal. Exactly. I'm willing to give you this opportunity because it's your destiny. And as it happens, I'm free now. We can start the test right away for 2 days, or you'll miss the chance, Chushike said, feeling he had firmly grasped the young boy's emotions, barely containing his excitement. Next, nothing unexpected happened. The young master of the Five Blades Gate was set on doing what he wanted, something no attendant could dissuade. Meanwhile, the surrounding crowd, mostly composed of elderly people and children, seemed to be convinced by Chushike's trick of using the avoid burning talisman in midair to point 2 people towards treasure. Watching the so-called half-adepti lead the boy away, the attendant was scolded and told not to follow. Paimon started to feel something was off. It seems that something's not quite right. Should we secretly follow and see what they're up to? Weren't you just admiring how impressive that guy was? Lumen asked, placing her hands on her hips, fingers slightly pressing against the white dress covering her midsection, her face showing a skeptical expression. Well, Paimon don't know much about these immortal talismans or anything. But thinking about it later, doing something like that doesn't seem too hard. It feels more like a trick performed by street entertainers, Paimon said, shrugging. We shouldn't stand by and do nothing in such an obviously suspicious situation. Let's follow them and see what they're up to, Nolan said after a moment of thought. Earlier, he had briefly activated his golden eye of judgment to inspect the so-called half-adepts in the crowd. The man was only level 17, about the same as an average knight of Favonius. There was no real danger to worry about. All right, Lumen and Paimon, being kind-hearted, had already had this idea. They couldn't allow the bad guys' schemes to succeed. Before long, the onlookers gradually dispersed. The young man who seemed to be the boy's attendant must have gone to inform his family. If they can afford an attendant, it means they must be a wealthy family in Liyue. If it really turns out to be a kidnapping, then rescuing that naive, deceived boy should definitely be worth 100,000 mora as a thank you. Ahem, this kind of thinking is what any normal person would have. It's not like he was being greedy for the reward of saving someone. After all, he considered himself a friendly, helpful young man of the new era, who would assist others within his capability. Even if he didn't get a reward, he wouldn't mind. Nolan smiled as he thought about it. On the road from Stonegate to the outskirts of Dihua Marsh, Nolan and Lumen were stealthily following the middle-aged man to see what he intended to do with the boy. Even though they were suspicious of his intentions, logically, he hadn't done anything wrong yet. But since he hadn't done anything yet and there was no evidence, it wasn't appropriate to act. If he cried wolf and turned the tables, it would be troublesome. Both Nolan and Lumen were cautious in this regard, while Paimon, after flying for a long time, began to slump her shoulders and complain about hunger. But there was no choice but to endure it for now. Around noon, the middle-aged man and the boy finally reached a desolate area rarely visited by people. "Stop here," Chushike, wearing a grey robe, halted and said with a playful smile. "Hey, are we there, great half-adeptus?" The boy, Xiaobing, looked around in confusion. "Ha, young sect master, it seems your father spoiled you too much. With such intelligence, how do you expect to inherit the Five Blades Gate in the future?" Chushike shook his head. At the same time, two figures appeared ahead on the road. They were the two who had supposedly gone to find treasure earlier, the young man with the headscarf and the round-faced chubby man. Chapter 204, Disciples of the Guhua Clan. "Wait a minute, what are you guys trying to do?" Even though Xiaobing was obsessed with the idea of cultivating immortality, he finally realized that he had been tricked. As for why? It was obvious they intended to use him to threaten his father and extort money. Seeing the two men approaching, Xiaobing hurriedly tried to run away, but he bumped into Chushike, who grabbed the back of his collar and lifted him up. "Humph, it wasn't easy to lure you out here. Now you're finally in my hands. Bastard, how dare you! My father won't let you get away with this." Suspended in midair, Xiaobing flailed his arms and legs angrily. "Blame your father for being so stingy. We spent months helping you seek your immortal fate. Even though we found nothing, he could have at least provided us with some living expenses. But he refused. We had no choice but to find another way to get what we deserved." The middle-aged man, Chushike, sneered. "Indeed, all consequences stem from your father's actions. So it's only fair that we use you to extract some money. I'm sure your father won't be stingy this time." The young man with the headscarf, Yao Liang, said, crossing his arms. "Humph, you never found the way to immortality, so naturally, you didn't earn any reward." Knowing that they only wanted money, Xiaobing felt slightly relieved. "Enough talk," Chushike said, tying Xiaobing up with a rope he had prepared in advance. He then turned to the round-faced chubby man, "Guangxian, go to the Five Blades Gate and demand 10 million mora. Tell them we'll release him once we get the money." 10 million mora was the amount Chushike estimated wouldn't hurt the Five Blades Gate too much. Asking for too much would cause delays, and the longer it took, the sooner experts from the Millelith would get involved, potentially leaving them with nothing and even facing imprisonment. They only wanted mora, not to harm the boy. Killing him would only bring them relentless pursuit by the Five Blades Gate. "Got it, boss. I'll go right away." The round-faced chubby man, Su Guangxian, nodded. Having lost the bet earlier, he had no choice but to take on this job that might be a bit dangerous. "All right, once you get the money, head straight back to our hideout," the middle-aged man, Chushike, reminded him. "They really are kidnappers. What should we do? Should we act now?" Paimon, hiding in the distance, saw that the boy was already tied up and looked furious. She turned to the others, seeking their input. "Yes, but before we fight them, Nolan, you should go invisible and get the boy out of there first to avoid him getting hurt, Lumen suggested, her white fingers gently tapping her chin as she pondered the best approach. No problem, that's what I was thinking. No problem, I was thinking the same thing, Nolan agreed, nodding slightly. Just as he was about to activate his concealment form skill, a sharp cry echoed from ahead. Where do you think you are going, you scoundrels, daring to kidnap in broad daylight? A young girl in grey clothes drew her long sword from its sheath, stepping between the two bandits. Humph, who's this wild girl? Qiu Shikai sneered at the sight of the girl. Did she really think she could be a hero with just that long sword? Mind your own business. The young man with the headscarf wasted no words. He reached into his coat and pulled out a short axe hidden at his waist, stepping forward and swinging it towards the girl. Today, he would show her that the Liyue underworld was no place for young girls to play hero. Petty tricks. The girl deftly deflected the axe with the side of her sword, diverting its path. As she did so, she slashed downward towards the young man's wrist. What? Yao Liang, caught off guard by the swift and ruthless move, quickly let go of the axe and withdrew his hand. If that sharp sword connected, his hand would be ruined. With a thud, the short axe fell to the ground. Though her initial strike missed, the girl pressed her advantage. With a swift twist of her sword, she aimed the tip at Yao Liang's throat. Damn it! Yao Liang backpedaled frantically, but he stumbled over a protruding rock and fell backward. As he lay on the ground, the sword still coming at him, he fearfully shielded his head with his arms. Watching the tip of the sword still keep coming towards him, he clutched his head in fear. Qiu Shikai, seeing the situation unfold, swiftly darted in front of Yao Liang, extending his right hand like a serpent's glide, aiming a strike towards the girl's chest. Mockingly, he remarked, traversing the Liyue, and you haven't even heard of my heavenly serpent hand. Shameless! The girl halted her retreat upon sensing the sneak attack, moving swiftly backward. Too late to evade. Qiu Shikai showed no mercy, having observed the girl's skill during her exchange with Yao Liang earlier, he knew she wasn't far from his own level. So on the rare occasion that he caught a break, he had to hit her hard with one blow before he could do so. Watch out, junior sister! Just as the crisis unfolded, another figure appeared also dressed in grey, but a man this time. Drawing his sword, he lunged towards Qiu Shikai from the side. Qiu Shikai frowned and withdrew his hand. Frowning, Qiu Shikai withdrew his hand. He hadn't worn his specially crafted metal gloves earlier when posing as an immortal, adeptus, otherwise, he could have easily broken the sword with a casual flick. He had no choice but to give up this opportunity to pursue it. With a slightly stern expression, Qiu Shikai looked at the man and the woman before him and inquired, "Who are you people?" "I am Sun Yu from the Guhua clan, and this is my junior sister, Little Kaer. We cannot stand by while such evil deeds are committed. Please release that boy." Sun Yu stood protectively in front of his junior sister, sternly addressing the two before him. The two of them passed by and discovered the situation over here, and had planned to rescue the boy once the kidnappers let their guard down, catching them off guard in the process. However, Little Kaer's impatience had led her to act prematurely. Thankfully, one kidnapper had already left, leaving two they could manage. Guhua clan? Qiu Shikai sneered, bursting into laughter. Is that the same Guhua clan that's down to a handful of members? Qiu Shikai laughed loudly as if he had heard something funny. Unfazed, he slowly donned a pair of metal gloves. If it were the Guhua clan of old, I'd show some respect. But now, I'll let you fools experience the power of my heavenly serpent hand. With that, Qiu Shikai and Yao Liang charged at Sun Yu and Little Kaer. Meanwhile, Paimon's eyes lit up from her hiding spot. Though Paimon doesn't know where these two heroes came from, now's the perfect chance to rescue the boy since no one's guarding him. Nolan and Lumen exchanged a glance, nodding in agreement. Chapter 205, Suppression. Liyue, outskirts of Stonegate. Two rogue martial artists were locked in battle with disciples of the Guhua clan. Meanwhile, Nolan, cloaked in invisibility, made his way towards the bound boy lying on the ground. Lumen stood ready, prepared to jump into the fray at any moment. Before long, Nolan reached the boy. Suddenly revealing himself, he startled the child, causing him to let out a sharp scream. The fighting parties paused, their attention drawn to the noise. Qiu Shikai, noticing a stranger near his golden goose, was alarmed. Using his light foot technique, he swiftly approached. Nolan chuckled lightly, scooped up the boy, and started to run back. This was deliberate on his part to draw the kidnappers' attention and lure them into pursuit. Lumen lay in ambush just a short distance away, poised to spring a surprise. Sure enough, before long, as the middle-aged man chased after them, Lumen suddenly emerged from the woods beside the road, swiftly knocking him unconscious. After all, he only had moderate strength among ordinary people and was no match for Lumen, who had reached level 42. Indeed, Lumen and Paimon had both gained 2 levels during their journey to Liyue over the past half-month, progressing exceptionally fast. One could only say they were truly formidable individuals, capable of once again gazing at the night sky and traveling to any star they pointed at. Meanwhile, the headscarf-wearing young man, witnessing this, was greatly surprised and attempted to flee, only to be intercepted by Sun Yu and his junior sister Little Kair from the Guhua clan. "Get lost!" Yao Yang shouted angrily. "Humph, dreaming. Do you think you still have a chance?" Kair sneered sarcastically. She and her senior brother blocked the thief with their swords, one on each side. "You!" Yao Yang clenched his fists. He had struggled against even one girl earlier, let alone now, with another man in the mix. With a sigh, he slumped down on the ground, resigned to capture. Since there was no rope, Sun Yu simply knocked the thief unconscious. Then, he and his junior sister walked towards Nolan and Lumen. "Thank you both for your help. May I ask who you are?" Sun Yu first expressed his gratitude with a bow, then asked with evident curiosity. "Wait, it's not 2, it's 3 of us." Before Nolan or Lumen could respond, Paimon hurriedly flew out from the side. She couldn't help with fighting, but being thanked was something she wouldn't miss. "What sort of wild monster is this?" Little Kair, seeing the flying creature suddenly appear, shouted sternly. "Eek!" Paimon immediately halted and covered her mouth, hiding behind Lumen. Her small hands clutched Lumen's snowy shoulder, peeking out fearfully at the girl in front. "Paimon is not a monster." Lumen, seeing Paimon misunderstood, displayed an angry expression on her fair face. Her amber eyes glared straight at Little Kair. Nolan frowned at the situation. When they introduced themselves, Nolan knew that the two were characters who had appeared in the game, from the Guhua clan, often seen in daily quests. The senior brother had a calm demeanor, devoted to reviving the Guhua clan. His junior sister, Little Kair, was quite different, temperamental and quirky, which today's encounter confirmed. "Junior sister," Sun Yu reprimanded, seeing his sister's rashness, then turned to Paimon, bowing respectfully. "Apologies, Lady Paimon. My junior sister was out of line. Please forgive us." "Lady Paimon, it's all right," Paimon didn't mind. Hearing the novel address, Paimon quickly forgot her previous displeasure and waved her hand, indicating she wasn't upset. "Senior brother, why are you siding with outsiders?" Little Kair, still not understanding, tugged at her brother's arm and complained. "Junior sister, apologize at once." Sun Yu was exasperated. It was clear she needed more worldly experience to prevent her from offending powerful people in the future. Little Kair rarely saw her senior brother scold her so loudly. A rush of indignation welled up inside her. "It's just because I called that weird flying thing a monster. How could you treat me like this, senior brother?" The more she thought about it, the more aggrieved she felt. Then, without a word, she turned and ran off. "Hey, junior sister." Sun Yu tried to catch her, but failed. He could only watch her figure get smaller as she ran further away. Helpless, he apologized to Nolan and the others once more before hurrying after his junior sister, fearing she might cause trouble on her own. She really is a strange little junior sister." Paimon spread her hands in speechlessness, then stamped her foot angrily in mid-air. "She called me a wild monster. No way, Paimon have to come up with a bad nickname for her too. For once, I agree with you, Paimon." Lumen laughed, hands on her hips. Let's call her Grumpy Junior Sister then." Paimon rubbed her chin, thinking for a few seconds before her eyes lit up. "That's not much of a nickname," Nolan commented, just as the boy he was holding spoke up. "Hey, who are you guys? Did you come to rescue me? Put me down." "Oh, sorry, I almost forgot." Nolan realized he was still holding the boy. As he set the boy down, he used Enmo to cut through the tightly bound ropes. The boy landed with a thud. "Hey, couldn't you be gentler?" Zhao Bing stood up, brushing off his pants, and complained. Humph, we just saved your life. Show some gratitude. Paimon retorted, hands on her hips, feeling that he was as grumpy as the grumpy junior sister. Ahem, you're right. I am Zhao Bing, the young master of the Five Blades Gate. To express my gratitude, would you honor us by visiting our Five Blades Gate? Zhao Bing tried to be formal, clasping his hands in a polite gesture. Paimon looked uncertain, glancing at Lumen and Nolan for guidance. Forget it. We saved you because it was convenient. We need to head to Liyue Harbor and can't afford to waste any more time, Lumen said, shaking her head, her golden hair swaying. At this, Zhao Bing's eyes widened. That won't do. You saved me, the young master. If we don't show any gratitude, what will people think of the Five Blades Gate? Just give us something valuable. That's better than useless words. Nolan thought silently. Of course, to maintain his image, he didn't say that. Instead, he nodded gently in agreement with Lumen. Chapter 206, The Land of Extreme Thunder. Haha. Just as both sides were pulling and pushing each other, a hearty voice echoed from behind. A burly man with short black hair, wielding a large hoop blade, strolled slowly down the dirt road. Embedded in the hilt of his blade was a conspicuous fire elemental vision. A vision bearer. Nolan instinctively used his golden eye of judgment. Level 47. Seeing the level above the man's head, Nolan couldn't help but be surprised that he was much higher level than himself. Of course, that wouldn't matter if they ended up fighting, he wouldn't be afraid at all. Ah, Dad! Zhao Bing looked at the newcomer and hurried over with excitement. Ah Bing, I've already heard. Falling for a con by mere swindlers is truly embarrassing. The brawny man ruffled Zhao Bing's hair, laughing as he spoke. But he claimed to be the disciple of the Lord Emperor, and he could use talismans without a vision, so I believed him. Zhao Bing explained sheepishly. All right, let's not dwell on it for now. The square-faced man with short black hair walked up to Nolan and the others, clasping his fists with a loud clap. I am Zhao Kuo, the master of the Five Blades Gate. Thank you all for saving my son. I, Zhao Kuo, am not one to leave debts unpaid. If you have any requests, just ask, and as long as it's within our capabilities, we will fulfill them. No need for formalities. We act chivalrously and righteously. Doing good deeds doesn't require repayment. You don't have to worry about it. If you feel bad, just give us some mora, hee. Paimon placed her hands behind her back, mimicking a stance. Lumen sighed, shaking her head. Asking for mora after saving someone was just too impolite. Well done, little Paimon, Nolan thought to himself. Listening to those kidnappers talk about how wealthy the Five Blades Gate was, it was clear they weren't entirely selfless. However, he couldn't bring himself to ask directly. Thankfully, Paimon, with her thick-skinned nature, could say what he couldn't. Haha, asking for mora, hey? This flying little friend is quite straightforward. The square-faced Zhao Kuo wasn't offended by Paimon's bluntness. Settling a life-saving debt with mora was a worthwhile trade. Zhao Kuo pondered for a moment, scratching the stubble on his chin. Earlier, a fat man, one of their accomplices, came to our Five Blades Gate demanding mora. I've never been one to yield to threats, so I captured him on the spot. After extracting the location of my son from him, I came here myself, intending to show these scoundrels the might of Zhao Kuo. But I didn't expect you noble individuals to save my son first, so giving you mora as thanks is fitting. However, I don't typically carry mora with me. Ah, I have it. This thunder jade, nurtured in the land of extreme thunder, should suffice as a token of my gratitude. The square-faced Zhao Kuo took out a purple round jade from his vision and handed it to Paimon. Wow, it's so beautiful. Paimon took it without hesitation and examined it under the sunlight, noticing flickers of lightning within. It's a rare electro-element material. If sold, it could fetch around 1 million mora. Satisfied? Zhao Kuo explained. Very satisfied. Paimon nodded enthusiastically, her starry eyes gleaming with a hint of a smile. In that case, my son and I will take our leave. Zhao Kuo nodded, glancing at the two unconscious kidnappers on the ground. By the way, leave these two to me. Kidnapping my son can't be forgiven easily. Punish them. Paimon seemed to imagine some bloody scene, her eyes widening in fear as she took a step back. Haha, don't worry. As a law-abiding citizen of Liyue, I wouldn't take their lives lightly. After teaching them a lesson, I'll hand them over to the Millelith. Besides, daring to use the Geo Archon's name to deceive people, they must be tired of living. Zhao Kuo chuckled, reassuringly. Phew, that's a relief. You scared me for a moment. Paimon patted her chest, sighing in relief. By the way, Mr. Zhao Kuo, what is this land of extreme thunder you mentioned? Does it produce these thunder jades? Nolan asked, recalling his promise to help little Amy find thunder element materials for her breakthrough. Zhao Kuo looked at Nolan, a bit surprised by the question, but he explained briefly. It's not a secret. In the eastern part of the underground mines of the chasm, there is an area full of thunder element ore. But because the thunder element there is unexpectedly dense and volatile, the ore is extremely difficult to mine. If you're planning to collect thunder element materials, I wouldn't recommend it, it's too dangerous. He observed the black-haired young man's slim build, seemingly not very strong, and offered a warning. All right, I'll be careful. Nolan nodded. The chasm, he knew, was an enormous mine, supposedly created by a meteorite impact. However, that area was currently sealed off due to some incident, and there was no way to get in. Nolan couldn't quite remember the exact reason. Oh well, I'll think of another way. If all else fails, I can earn more mora and buy the materials, he thought. After Zhao Kuo left with the two kidnappers and his son, Nolan and the others continued their journey towards Liyue Harbor. Walking is so tiring. If we come across a passing caravan, let's ask them for a ride, Paimon suggested, even though she was flying in the air with her arms drooping as if she were exhausted. All right, Lumen nodded gently. Merchants hauling goods usually don't mind taking on passengers if there's space, and it wouldn't cost much mora. If you're tired, you can ask Lumen to carry you, Nolan teased, smiling. Hey, you. Lumen's white high-heeled boots, which came up to her knees, exposed her pale thighs that moved rhythmically as she walked. She puffed out her cheeks in displeasure and glared at him. Hee, Lumen, Paimon think Nolan has a point, Paimon said, twisting her body in the air, her starry eyes filled with anticipation as she looked at Lumen. Lumen sighed and rubbed her forehead in exasperation. All right, it seems like you've been eating too much lately, Paimon. You've gained weight and now feel tired. We need to find time for some physical training, or else how will you outrun slimes and be my guide? Physical training. Paimon's eyes widened in horror, and she waved her hands frantically. And no, Paimon did rather not be carried. Forget about the training. Paimon promises Paimon will be a good guide. Paimon detested any activities that required physical exertion, like carrying things while shopping. Chapter 207, Akaimu. In Daihua Marsh. Walking on the dirt road, a gentle breeze brushed past. The white ribbon on the blonde girl's scarf fluttered lightly, like cattails on a riverbank swaying in the wind. Oh, look, isn't that the grumpy little sister and her senior brother from earlier? Paimon crossed her arms, causing slight wrinkles on her sleeves, and pointed out the two figures sitting by the shore. They seem to be fishing. Should we go over and say hi? Lumen glanced at Nolan with her ember eyes. After all, those disciples from the Guhua clan had lent a hand in rescuing that boy Zhao Bing. It would be good to inform them that the boy had safely returned to his father. Maybe we should just leave it. That hot-headed junior sister doesn't seem too friendly, Nolan hesitated, not keen on dealing with someone with a bad temper. It seems a bit late, they've already noticed us, Paimon pointed ahead with her finger. Sun Yu was waving at them. It seems there's no way out, let's go over there. Looks like we have no choice but to go over, Lumen lightly tapped her fair cheek with her palm, nodded towards them, and walked over. Sigh, all right, Nolan sighed helplessly. If they hadn't been noticed, they could have quietly slipped away. But now that they had been spotted and greeted, it would seem rude to just walk off. Resigned, Nolan and the others walked towards Sun Yu and his junior sister. Sun Yu, and grumpy little sister, what brings you two here? Paimon shrugged, looking puzzled. Who are you calling grumpy, you wild monster? Before Sun Yu could answer, little Kei erupted, clearly infuriated by the nickname directed at her. I've told you, Paimon is Paimon, not some wild monster, you annoying grumpy little sister. Paimon glared at little Kei, firing back without hesitation. Seeing the two about to start arguing, Lumen and Sun Yu quickly pulled their respective sides back. I'm sorry, my junior sister is a bit short-tempered, but she is also a good person who often helps others, so please forgive her." Sun Yu clasped his hands together and said with a bitter smile. Nolan laughed heartily and said, "Haha, no worries at all, we didn't take it to heart." That being said, it was quite interesting to watch Paimon and Little Kr argue. "Phew, thank you," Sun Yu nodded, then got to the main point of why he had stopped them. "Earlier, because of my junior sister's temper tantrum, we didn't see what happened next. Is that boy safe now?" "Heh, that's for sure, by Ben Paimon and Traveler, Hee, of course. With Paimon and the Traveler on the case, Paimon looked at Nolan, as if remembering something, and continued, "And this guy too. The boy has been safely returned to his father, and the kidnappers have been brought to justice." "That's good to hear." Sun Yu nodded, then responded to Paimon's earlier question with a smile. "It's almost noon. My junior sister and I were fishing here to prepare for lunch. Would you like to try the special grilled fish recipe handed down by our Guhua clan ancestors?" "What? Special grilled fish? Paimon wants some." "Paimon wants some." As soon as Paimon heard about the delicious food, she immediately got excited and agreed without even asking Nolan and Lumen's opinion. Both Nolan and Lumen shot her a look of exasperation. "Little glutton." Little Kr, standing behind Sun Yu with her arms crossed, huffed disdainfully. "All right, junior sister, go back to fishing and calm yourself," Sun Yu commanded with the authority of a senior disciple. In response, Little Kr had no choice but to obediently return to her fishing. Afterwards, the group then set up a campfire, burning some charcoal to prepare for grilling the fish. Nolan and Lumen took out some pre-prepared boiled water and dried food. After a long time, when the charcoal and fish were ready to be processed. After a while, when the charcoal and fish were ready, they suddenly heard Little Kr shout, "Senior brother, come quickly. I think I've caught something big." Nolan and the others turned to look at her. Little Kr was holding a fishing rod made of green bamboo. The transparent fishing line was taut, bending the rod as it extended into the river, even pulling Little Kr towards the water. But how could that be possible? Despite her temper, she was quite strong for an ordinary person. Nolan saw that she was at level 16. What kind of fish could have the strength to pull her like that? They quickly ran over to see what was happening. Sun Yu joined Little Kr in pulling the rod, and it seemed like the line was about to snap. "It's the Akaimu," Nolan said, surprised as he saw the faint silhouette in the water. He recognized it from the game's fishing system. When it first launched, he had fished daily to exchange for weapons until there were no fish left. Thus, he had seen this very distinctive red fish at many fishing spots. "This water bully, looks like we'll have to give up, junior sister. Our fishing line isn't strong enough," Sun Yu said with a sigh, slightly surprised upon hearing Nolan's words and recalling the fish's ferocious nature. "Damn it!" Little Kr was disappointed, but noticed her brother's hand on the rod with hers, which gave her a little secret joy. "Senior brother, I think we should keep pulling. Maybe it'll tire out suddenly," she suggested. Sure, why not," Sun Yu replied, unaware of his junior sister's thoughts. "Wow, this red fish looks fierce, and it also looks delicious. Nolan, why don't you shoot it with your bow?" Paimon, flying in midair, blinked and suggested. "That's no problem," Nolan nodded. Using his golden eye of judgment, he observed that the fish was at level 12, seemingly stronger than an untrained ordinary person. Even a small fry count, he thought, not wanting to waste the offered adventure EXP. He took out his adventurer's hunting bow, aimed at the red fish, and with a swift whoosh, he shot an arrow. The ordinary arrow accurately pierced its head, mixing its bright red blood into the river, ending its troublesome life in the water. Defeated a powerful enemy, obtained 42 Adventure Express. "Oh? Brother Nolan's archery skills are quite good," Sun Yu remarked, somewhat surprised to see him easily hit the hidden Akaimu beneath the river. He had thought Nolan was focused on practicing melee combat with his large sword and hadn't expected his archery to be so sharp. "Humph, if senior brother had a bow and arrow, he could do it too," Little Kr said dismissively. By now, everyone was used to her personality. Paimon had wanted to argue but thought better of it. Eating was more important. She turned to Sun Yu and said, "Quick, pull it up. Otherwise, the blood in the fish meat will dry up, and it won't taste good." "All right." Just as Sun Yu nodded and prepared to lift the Akaimu up to the surface of the river with his junior sister. A huge black figure suddenly leaped from the river, splashing water on the clothes of the people near the riverbank. It opened its huge mouth and snapped the fishing line, swallowing the Akaimo whole. Then, it sank back into the river and swiftly swam upstream. Chapter 208, Invitation. What is that? Paimon stared in disbelief as the red fish was snatched away, unable to help but shout. Let's go catch it. Lumen wiped the river water off her snow-white chest and a hint of anger crossed her face. Wait, if I'm not mistaken, that's the Akaimo, known as a river monster. It's extremely fierce. Trying to catch it would put us in danger. Sun Yu quickly reminded Ying and the others, sensing their unfamiliarity with this river creature. He, don't worry. Both Lumen and Nolan are strong fighters. A mere big fish is nothing. Paimon said, hands on her hips, floating in mid-air. Yet, my archery skills are excellent. As long as it's within my range, it won't get away, Nolan nodded. He had seen that the catfish was at level 33. It truly lived up to its reputation as a monster, astonishing him. Using archery is indeed much safer, Sun Yu said thoughtfully, rubbing his chin. Attacking with a bow from the shore was certainly safer than fighting in the water. He had thought it dangerous from his own perspective but realized these new friends were much stronger. Maybe they were even on par with Xingqiu, the most outstanding disciple of the Guhua clan. If he could invite them to join the Guhua clan, the goal of revitalization might not be far off. Seeing Sun Yu deep in thought, Nolan found it a bit strange but didn't dwell on it. He quickly chased after the big catfish along the riverbank. If he didn't catch up, it would get away. The red dark scale catfish swam quickly in the river, but Nolan's running speed was also impressive. He easily caught up, feeling the wind pressure from breaking through the air. He took out an arrow and knocked it on his bowstring, eyeing the dark figure in the river. For someone with his superb archery skills, shooting while running was a piece of cake. Intense fire element gathered at the arrowhead. Given the catfish was covered in water element, a vaporizing reaction should be enough to take it down. Normally, a fire element arrow wouldn't be able to penetrate the river and hit the catfish. The water would quickly extinguish the fire element. But for Nolan, who could make arrows ignore part of the spatial distance and hit the target directly, this wasn't an issue. The arrow shot out, instantly appearing above the dark figure in the river and piercing its head. The searing fire element burned in its brain. The red dark scale catfish first felt excruciating pain, but the next second, the pain evaporated into nothingness. And it lost consciousness. Nolan watched as the enormous catfish floated to the surface of the river, then he put away his bow. He approached the shore and poked the fish with his moonlight greatsword. When it didn't react, he rolled it over to reveal its pale, unmarked belly. At the same time, his character panel popped up, indicating the experience points he had earned. Defeated a powerful enemy, obtained 323 Adventure Express. Wow, it seems this fish is almost as strong as a large slime, he thought. If a river monster has this kind of power, what would the endless ocean hold? Nolan's mind wandered with possibilities. As the Akaimo floated toward the campfire by the shore, everyone helped pull it out of the water. He realized it was at least 2 meters long. His arrow had struck it right in the head. Wow, what a big fish! Paimon exclaimed excitedly, waving her arms in the air, her eyes shining brightly. The bright midday sun shone down on Lumen's golden hair, casting a delicate shadow on her fair face, hinting at the surprise in her eyes. Can we eat this kind of fish? Nolan asked Sun Yu. Regular catfish were edible, but it was best to ask someone knowledgeable about this peculiar monster fish. Not yet, Sun Yu shook his head. What do you mean, not yet? Paimon asked, scratching her head in confusion. Humph, this kind of monster fish has poison in its stomach, head and skin. It needs to be properly processed before it's safe to eat, little Kair answered for her senior brother. I see, Nolan nodded. Now that they knew, it was much easier to handle. Nolan used his great sword to decapitate and gut the fish, slicing it open with ease. He skinned it and buried the poisonous parts in a pit nearby. With everyone's effort, they cut the fish into even pieces. They grilled and roasted the meat, adding spices for a delicious lunch. It was a warm, pleasant afternoon. The leftover fish had to be discarded since both Nolan and Lumen's inventory spaces were already filled with other supplies, and Sun Yu and his sister couldn't carry it either. It would spoil if kept too long. Brother Nolan, where are you heading next? Sun Yu asked, as if making a decision. Of course, we're heading to Liyue Harbor. Is there something you need? Paimon interjected before Nolan could respond. He gave her a look of exasperation. Was she trying to be his spokesperson? Oh, it's nothing major. Have you heard of our sect, the Guhua clan? Sun Yu asked with a smile. Only by name, Lumen said delicately, resting her fair wrist against her cheek and elbow on her knee. In truth, she hadn't heard of it at all. That's understandable. The Guhua clan has fallen into decline, Sun Yu said with a bitter smile. He continued, my junior sister and I ventured out to seek immortals and revive our sect, much like the Five-Blade sect. Although finding an immortal is difficult, we don't want to give up. That's why we intended to ask the Five-Blade sect if they had any leads. We were fortunate to meet you along the way, so I was wondering if we could invite you to join our Guhua clan. With your support, even if we can't find an immortal, we would be much closer to reviving our sect. He stood up and clasped his fists in a respectful gesture. Nolan and the others fell silent, surprised by Sun Yu's invitation. They hadn't expected Sun Yu to invite them to join the Guhua sect. And it's such a coincidence I'm also seeking immortals in Liyue to learn their arts. Nolan thought silently. He. What benefits do we get if we join your Guhua clan? Paimon asked, rubbing her hands together with a grin. Well, there aren't any real benefits at the moment, Sun Yu admitted with a wry smile. The only thing their clan had to offer was the Guhua sword technique, and he doubted they would be interested in that. He had expected this response and had only asked on a hopeful whim. He continued, haha, since that's the case, let's forget about it. If you encounter any difficulties in Liyue Harbor, you can seek out my junior brother, Xingqiu, the second young master of the Feiyun Commerce Guild. I'll write a letter of introduction for you. If you encounter any trouble in Liyue Harbor, you can seek him out. I'm sure Xingqiu will assist you out of respect for me. Though Sun Yu hadn't succeeded in recruiting them to the Guhua clan, it was still worthwhile to make friends and build goodwill in the martial world. Chapter 209, Way to Make Money. Your junior brother, Xingqiu. Thank you, Nolan expressed his gratitude before explaining further. It's not that we need any specific benefits, it's just that we have our own matters to attend to. Joining the Guhua clan might divide our focus and time. If we're just going to join in name only without contributing, it doesn't seem necessary, right? I see. It seems I was a bit presumptuous, Sun Yu scratched the back of his head, understandingly. It became clear to him that reviving the Guhua clan needed to rely on his own efforts. Depending on others for the clan's revival seemed rather unrealistic, a shaky foundation, so to speak. Senior brother, you're always talking about reviving the sect. Can't you focus on yourself more? Little Kay raised an eyebrow. She wanted to say spend more time with me, but thought better of it at the last moment. You don't understand, junior sister. As disciples of Guhua clan, it's our duty, Sun Yu shook his head. Then, he took out a pen and some snow-white paper from his bag, using a flat stone on the ground to write a brief letter, which he handed to Nolan. Well then, we have some business to attend to at the Stonegate. Until we meet again. He cupped his hands and smiled. Until we meet again, Paimon mimicked his gesture. Nolan and Lumen also cupped their hands in farewell. With Sun Yu and Little Kair, the two disciples of the Guhua clan, departed, Nolan and his companions decided to continue their journey while it was still early. According to Sun Yu, it would take 2 days to reach Wangshu Inn from here. If they didn't want to spend another night outdoors, they needed to set off quickly. If they hurried, they could arrive by tomorrow night. Having just eaten, Nolan and Lumen couldn't immediately start running. They walked leisurely for half an hour before picking up the pace. When they encountered hills, they ran up and used their wind gliders to slide down, saving both time and energy. This way of traveling is a bit too slow. It would be great if we had bicycles, Nolan remarked as they walked along the road. With bicycles, given their physical strength, they might travel as fast as motor vehicles, provided the bicycles were sturdy enough. What's a bicycle? Paimon asked, rubbing her chin in curiosity. This is a type of transportation from my world that you can pedal to move quickly, Nolan explained in detail, seeing Lumen and Paimon curious about it. Since they had some time to spare, he treated it as a casual conversation. Oh, so that's what it is. It reminds me of something similar I saw with my brother on another planet. Lumen patted the hem of her skirt, revealing her snow-white thigh, and lightly tapped her head with her arms crossed. Nolan's words brought back memories from her mind. It was a world where industrialization was just beginning, and slow travel was a common frustration. Suddenly one day, a small company producing wooden carts introduced a new product, a two-wheeled vehicle connected by an iron frame in the middle. It seemed similar to what Nolan described, just with a slightly different name. They called it the human-powered two-wheeled iron frame vehicle. That company seemed to have made its fortune because of this product. Wait a minute. Lumen seemed to realize something, suddenly raising her left hand to stop Nolan, who was swaying his arm next to him. Nolan looked at the fair palm resting on his right hand, stopping in his tracks, and asked in confusion, "Hey? Did you think of something?" Lumen glanced at him with amber eyes, a smile appearing on her fair face. "Do you think we could research and develop the human-powered two-wheeled iron frame vehicle, start a production factory, and if we sell it well in Teyvat, we won't have to worry about Mora anymore?" Her words took Nolan by surprise, but he found himself intrigued. The principles behind a bicycle weren't complex. With a bit of curiosity and experimentation, one could figure it out. Recreating it would take some time, but was definitely possible. The main components of a bicycle were the gears and the frame, which Teyvat's blacksmiths could certainly handle. The real challenge would be the rubber tires. In Mondstadt, he had seen carriages with wooden wheels, so he wasn't sure if rubber even existed in this world. After all, if rubber were available, people would have thought to use it for carriage wheels. Nolan voiced his concerns. "That's a minor issue. If it doesn't work out, we can use wooden wheels like those on carriages. Even if it's a bit bumpy, it's still an excellent means of transportation," Lumen said confidently. Hey! Weren't you supposed to be looking for your brother? Why are you talking about starting a business?" Paimon interjected from the sidelines, utterly confused by the conversation between these two from different worlds. To join in, she tried to steer Lumen back on track. Lumen, who had been excited, suddenly looked disheartened. She released Nolan's hand that she had been holding and let her shoulders slump. Although this project seemed profitable, establishing a factory capable of mass-producing the human-powered two-wheel iron frame vehicle was not something that could be achieved overnight. Pursuing this could delay finding her brother, which was unacceptable. She looked somewhat dejectedly at Nolan. "If you're interested in this, you can take care of it. I still need to find my brother." Lumen felt a tinge of regret, having come up with such a brilliant business idea. Seeing her reaction, Nolan couldn't help but smile. "Haha, that's not a big deal either. We don't necessarily need to build a factory. We could just make a prototype and ride it around the bustling port city of Liyue. Those savvy merchants will probably be knocking down our door by tomorrow morning to collaborate with us. We could sell the design at a high price and make a fortune without worrying about startup capital or the risk of not selling." "Is it really that amazing?" Paimon asked skeptically. "It should be. And once Lumen becomes filthy rich from this, Paimon, you'll be able to have a different fancy meal every day," Nolan teased enticingly. "What? Eating different delicious foods every day?" Upon hearing Nolan's words, Paimon's eyes lit up, shining brighter than the sun. She immediately turned to Lumen and urged, "How about we take it slow with finding your brother? Since we don't have many leads right now, and it's related to the Abyss Order, why don't we become the richest in Teyvat first, eat our way through all 7 nations, and then continue our search?" Hee. Lumen rolled her eyes at Paimon's waist-bent suggestion. Whenever food was mentioned, Paimon threw everything else out the window. After a brief consideration, Lumen also found Nolan's plan feasible. Making a prototype wouldn't take much time. Plus, with Mora in hand, she could enhance the still initial state of her artifacts and weapons. This would make future adventures and the search for her brother much easier. Chapter 210, Wangshu Inn. Even though creating bicycles in Teyvat seemed quite profitable, neither Nolan nor Lumen felt an urgent need to pursue it immediately. After all, they couldn't forget their primary purpose of coming to Liyue Harbor, to attend the Rite of Dissension and meet the Geo-Archon, Morux. They could find time later, during their rest periods, to draft a design. Then, they could commission a blacksmith to forge the necessary parts. After assembling and testing the prototype themselves, they could approach a discerning merchant to sell the design, such as the Tianquan of the Liyue Kixing, Lady Ning Guang. Based on what Nolan knew about her, Ning Guang, one of the foremost merchants in all of Teyvat, wouldn't miss such a lucrative opportunity delivered right to her doorstep. This approach would also be the most time and labor efficient. Lumen had to travel extensively to find her brother, and Nolan needed to gather Adventure EXP and rare skills to enhance his abilities. They couldn't afford to spend time on manufacturing, as it would be counterproductive. That night, Nolan and Lumen encountered a small village while traveling in the wild. They hoped to find accommodation but were told that the village's inns were fully booked by others heading to Liyue Harbor for the upcoming Rite of Dissension. With no other options, they decided to camp outdoors. It wasn't too different from when they had to camp while on quests, except for the need to take turns keeping watch, which slightly affected their sleep quality. After only one day, Nolan missed the feeling of holding little Amy's soft body in his arms and falling asleep together. In the morning, Nolan and Lumen packed up their tent and continued on their journey. Along the way, they encountered some hilly churls blocking the road, seemingly intending to rob travelers. Unfortunately for the hilly churls, they picked the wrong targets. Nolan quickly dealt with them and even tested his newly acquired elemental skill, Dandelion Shield. When activated, cyan wind elements enveloped him and began to spin rapidly. The hilly churl archers' arrows were easily deflected. Even arrows crafted with electro crystals couldn't pierce through, although they did reduce the shield's wind elements more quickly. If the shield didn't rotate, Nolan estimated the energy drain would be doubled. This meant his shield's duration was effectively extended. Not only was it effective against arrows, but the hilly churl berserkers' axes were also deflected, exposing them to sudden openings. Nolan easily seized this opening and defeated them with a single sword strike. Nolan capitalized on these openings and easily defeated them. He took down 2 hilly churl berserkers and 9 smaller hilly churls, earning over 5,000 Adventure EXP. He glanced at his character panel. Adventure EXP, 6,325. With over 6,300 Adventure EXP, he was now relatively well off in terms of resources. However, Nolan decided not to use them just yet. He still wanted to find a basic swordsmanship skill and level it up to the maximum before merging it into his already extraordinary royal one-handed swordsmanship, which had 3 exceptional traits, to see if it could evolve further. It wouldn't take much, just 4,500 Adventure EXP. As for where to find this basic swordsmanship skill, well, there just so happened to be someone nearby who had traveled through the Star Ocean realms. Surely, she knew a lot and would have some basic swordsmanship techniques to offer. With this in mind, while they were resting on a grassy patch at midday, Nolan sat on a rock and ate, then turned to the blonde girl. Lumen, it seems like my swordsmanship has hit a bottleneck recently. I was hoping to learn some new techniques to broaden my understanding. Do you think you could spare some time to give me a few pointers? Lumen, chewing on a thick biscuit, looked at him with some confusion. This guy's swordsmanship is already so good, and he's hitting a bottleneck? She find that hard to believe. She bit a crescent-shaped piece off the biscuit, chewed it slowly, and swallowed it before taking a sip of water and saying, "You, just say you want to learn my swordsmanship directly. If we get to the inn early this afternoon, I can spar with you a bit." By spar, she meant that if he wanted to learn her swordsmanship, he couldn't hold back and would have to teach her what he knew as well. Of course, that's no problem. Nolan smiled and nodded. He seemed to remember something and asked, "By the way, since you've traveled to so many planets, have you come across any methods to enhance spiritual power?" "Hey, don't assume I know everything just because I've traveled a lot. My brother and I were traveling to explore cultures and histories, not to specifically gather martial arts techniques," Lumen said with a helpless expression. Haha, Nolan scratched the back of his head awkwardly. Had made sense, she was already very powerful, so she probably didn't need any martial arts techniques. If she hadn't mysteriously lost most of her power, she wouldn't be retraining while traveling. After resting, the 3 of them set off again. A bright, clear moon hung high in the sky, illuminating the massive mountain with buildings constructed around it, their tops adorned with golden-leaved trees. By nightfall, they finally arrived at Wangshu Inn. The place was bustling, with caravans parked all around the roads below the inn. It seemed they could find a caravan heading to Liyue Harbor tomorrow and hitch a ride. "Wow, there are so many people here!" Paimon exclaimed, looking around curiously. She even flew up to a street lamp, poking at the glowing yellow lantern that lit up the night. "Ouch, it's a bit hot." She quickly pulled her finger back as the lantern swayed. Lumen avoided a couple walking towards her and laughed at Paimon. "All right, stop looking around. Let's check if there are any rooms available in the inn first. It feels like there are way too many people here." Hehe, Paimon chuckled as she floated back. As they walked closer, the roadsides were lined with stalls, mostly selling Liyue snacks, toys for children, and small games. It smells so good. Having skipped dinner, Paimon's mouth watered at the sight, her eyes sparkling as she stared at Lumen. The lines are too long. Let's get a room first and come back later, Lumen sighed, rubbing her forehead. Nolan noticed one of the stalls was selling masks, which reminded him of Xiao, the vigilant yaksha. Xiao often stayed at Wangshu Inn. He wondered if he might get a chance to meet him. Xiao was an adeptus, and getting to know him might lead to learning some adeptal arts. However, considering his aloof demeanor in the game, he seemed a bit hard to approach. Chapter 211, Only One Room Left. At Wangshu Inn, Nolan and his companions climbed the winding wooden stairs to the inn's lobby. Behind the reception desk stood a lady who appeared to be from Mondstadt, registering guests. They approached her. "All right, Spring Rain Pavilion, room 25, got it," said a middle-aged man in a robe, confirming with the lady before taking his key and leaving. "Hello, may I help you with a room reservation?" The lady, Vergoldette, asked with a smile, glancing curiously at the flying, humanoid fairy beside the young man and woman. "Yes, we need 2 single rooms for one night," Paimon replied, hands behind her back, nodding. "I'm sorry, but due to the influx of guests recently, there is only 1 single room left in Autumn Wind Pavilion," Vergoldette said with a regretful expression. "What? Only 1 room left?" Paimon exclaimed in surprise, scratching her head before turning to Lumen and Nolan. "What should we do? The innkeeper says there's only 1 room left." Nolan murmured, stroking his chin as he glanced at Lumen, who was also looking back at him. "If you don't mind, you could share the room. We can lay an extra mattress on the floor. It's better than sleeping outside," Vergoldette suggested with a smile, sensing that the 2 young travelers had a close relationship, whether or not they were a couple. "What do you think?" Nolan asked Lumen. It was unfortunate that only 1 room was available, but they were lucky to have arrived at Wangshu Inn early. Otherwise, even this room might have been taken. "If you're willing to sleep on the floor, then it's fine by me," Lumen replied after a moment's thought, her amber eyes shifting to the floor. After all, they had shared a house in Mondstadt, and staying in the same room for one night was not a big deal as long as they weren't sharing the same bed. "I have no problem with that," Nolan agreed with a smile. In a way, sharing a room marked a certain progress in their relationship. "Hehe, then let's rent the last room," Paimon said cheerfully, as she didn't mind where Lumen slept as long as they stayed together. "All right," Vergoldette said, taking out the key and quoting the price. "The room rent is 10,000 mora, with a 10,000 mora deposit for the key, totaling 20,000 mora." The price was reasonable, and Nolan promptly paid the amount and took the key. "Could someone show us to our room?" Paimon asked, as they were unfamiliar with the layout and couldn't locate Autumn Wind Pavilion on their own. "No problem. But just to clarify, I'm the boss, not the innkeeper," Vergoldette corrected with a smile before continuing. "By the way, we're holding a small auction tonight in the courtyard at around 8 or 9. Feel free to join if you are interested." "An auction? Will there be any rare treasures?" Paimon asked with surprise. Nolan and Lumen looked at her curiously. "That's a little secret. You'll have to come and see for yourselves," the innkeeper, Vergoldette, said with a playful smile. "All right then," Lumen replied, her amber eyes glancing at her briefly. They followed the inn staff through a long corridor, arriving at the Autumn Wind Pavilion and finding room 18. "This is your room," the staff member indicated before leaving to attend to other duties. Nolan took out the iron key, inserted it into the lock, and opened the door. The room was already lit by candlelight, casting a warm yellow glow on them. Directly ahead was a wooden window through which the moon and the bright lights below could be seen. "Wow, it's so beautiful," Paimon exclaimed, pressing her tiny hands against the glass as she admired the view. Nolan and Lumen walked in, closing the door behind them. "It's a bit simple, but it looks cozy," Lumen said, glancing around. The room was indeed small, containing only a narrow bed and a small round table with chairs. The bed was placed against the wall by the window, with barely a meter of space between the bed and the door, making it quite cramped. It was a typical single room, just enough for temporary lodging. The wooden floor could accommodate an extra mat for sleeping, but it would make moving around difficult. "It's fine, it's a single room, so we can't expect too much," Nolan commented. "Now that we've sorted the room, let's go down." We haven't had dinner yet, and I really want to try Liyue's cuisine. Paimon said eagerly, turning away from the window. Sure, and we can check out what Wangshu Inn has for auction later, Nolan agreed with a smile. All right, you paid for the room, so I'll cover dinner, Lumen offered with a smile. The room's light shone on her skirt, casting a shadow that highlighted her pale legs. Her boots bore traces of dust from their journey. At the open-air restaurant below Wangshu Inn, a platform had been set up, seemingly for the upcoming auction. It was a perfect arrangement to enjoy dinner while watching the event. Before dinner, they strolled around, sampling some snacks before heading to the restaurant at around 8. They ordered several Liyue dishes just as the auction was about to begin. The event had attracted a large crowd. Every table and chair was occupied, and some people stood to watch. Merchants, adventurers, and travelers had all gathered with the same curiosity as Nolan and his companions to join in the excitement. Soon, their dishes arrived: tofu with minced meat, tiangsu meat, lotus flower crisps, assorted stir-fried noodles, and more. At the same time, a middle-aged man in a Liyue robe, sporting a mustache and beard, stepped onto the auction platform. His presence caught everyone's attention, and the chatter died down a bit. Chapter 212, The Second Young Master of Feiyun Commerce Guild. Good evening, everyone. I'm Huayan, the innkeeper of Wangshu Inn. Normally, Wangshu Inn is just a place for you to stay and eat. We've never held an auction before. But it so happens that several large commerce guilds from Liyue are gathered here today. They noticed that our inn is filled with distinguished guests, some of whom are quite famous. So, they proposed holding an auction here to liven things up by showcasing some rare treasures. Of course, I couldn't refuse such a great idea. I even shamelessly took on the role of auctioneer. I hope you don't mind. Innkeeper Huayan started with a lot of formalities, which made everyone feel bored. They urged him to get on with it, as their food was getting cold. They didn't care about the reasons for holding the auction, they were just there for the excitement. Alright, let's get started with the first item. It's a brilliant diamond gemstones fragment provided by the Jinhua Commerce Guild. As we all know, when a vision holder wants to surpass their current limits, they need elemental materials corresponding to their vision. This brilliant diamond gemstones fragment, however, is compatible with all 7 elements, making it an extremely rare and valuable material. I'm sure many vision holders here tonight might be interested. So, without further ado, the starting bid is 100,000 mora. Let's begin. The innkeeper Huayan signaled the staff to bring out a small box. When the lid was lifted, it revealed 6 irregularly shaped, golden yellow crystals. Oh, it seems the Jinhua Commerce Guild is being quite generous, setting the starting price so low. They're just putting on a show. This kind of universal material is in high demand, and the final price won't be low. I saw 7 or 8 vision holders here earlier. Even if they don't need it now, they will in the future. Exactly. The surrounding crowd buzzed with discussions. Nolan overheard 2 men in merchant attire at the next table talking, and a thought struck him. If these brilliant diamond gemstones fragments are universally compatible, then buying them for fiscal might be a good idea. Hey, Lumen, isn't this the material you used for your breakthrough last time? Paimon floated up to get a better look at the item Huayan had presented, sounding a bit surprised. She was referring to the time right after they met, before they reached Mondstadt. Nolan was surprised as he looked at Lumen. He remembered that she, capable of controlling all 7 elements, used some unusual materials for her breakthroughs. If he recalled correctly, it was indeed this kind of golden brilliant diamond gemstones fragment. This means Lumen needs these materials for her breakthroughs too. Fiscal might have to wait since she can use other electro materials, but Lumen seems to need this specific kind. He wondered if this was the only downside of being able to control 7 elements. Yes, it is. I didn't expect to find such materials at this auction. I'm determined to get them, Lumen said excitedly, pausing from eating her stir-fried noodles and licking her lips. The night breeze gently moved the ribbons behind her, and the soft curves of her shoulder blades were highlighted by the moonlight and lantern light. 200,000. Just as Lumen and Paimon were talking, a young man a few tables to their right called out a bid. He had a dendro vision hanging on his chest. Nolan instinctively glanced at him with his golden eye of judgment. Level 26. Not weak at all. It seemed he was also preparing for future breakthroughs. After all, finding the necessary materials when reaching the level 40 limit could take a lot of time, so preparing in advance was normal. Wow, what should we do? The price doubled in an instant. Do you have enough Mora? Paimon looked anxiously at Lumen, her hand frozen mid-bite with a lotus crisp. When we returned to Mondstadt the day before yesterday, I sold all the materials we had collected from defeating monsters to the association. Now I have around 1 million Mora. I hope it's enough, Lumen said, a hint of worry on her fair face. The last time she used a brilliant diamond gemstone for a breakthrough was purely by chance, finding it in a hilly churl camp. She hadn't encountered any since then. So, she didn't want to miss this opportunity. No problem, I have a few 100,000 Mora as well. If it's not enough, I can lend you some, Nolan offered with a smile. At the current market price, these brilliant diamond gemstones fragments should be around 1 million Mora. Their combined Mora should be sufficient. Thank you. Lumen's face brightened at his words. Lumen has developed good feelings towards you, obtained 250 affection points. Current affection level, LV.6, 505/600. Soon, others started bidding, increasing the price by tens of thousands each time. Quickly, the first auction item's price reached 1.1 million, surpassing its market value. Since the market couldn't always supply these materials, a bit of overpricing was normal. Anyone else? Huayan called out from the stage. Despite his voice not being loud, everyone in the room heard him clearly, indicating his strength wasn't to be underestimated. Nolan curiously checked him out, discovering Huayan was level 53. Not a vision holder, yet reaching this level implied his mastery of martial arts was top-notch. 1,115,000. Lumen quickly placed her bid. All right, 1,115,000, any more bids? Huayan asked. The open-air restaurant fell quiet as everyone continued eating. The vision holders, who needed the material, seemed to think the price was too high and didn't continue bidding. Unlike Lumen, they didn't absolutely need this material for their breakthroughs. Other elemental materials were available. Phew, it seems we've got it, Paimon sighed in relief, patting her chest. But suddenly, a voice from their right rear called out, 1,300,000. What? Paimon jumped, quickly turning to see who the audacious bidder was. It was a young man with dark blue short hair, wearing a matching thin shirt and white short boots. When he noticed their gaze, he smiled back at them from a distance. Who is that boy? Why did he raise the price so much? Lumen asked, turning back in frustration. That must be Xingqiu, Nolan thought, recognizing the boy who looked exactly like the character in the game. Unexpectedly, just yesterday Sun Yu sent a letter saying they could seek his help if needed, and now they encountered him by chance. The golden vision of judgment revealed he was level 39, suggesting he also needed these breakthrough materials. That boy seems quite wealthy. We can't keep increasing by only 50,000 Mora. The upper limit is 1.5 million, otherwise, we won't have enough for Liyue Harbor, Nolan reasoned. Lumen had 1 million Mora, and he had 700,000. They needed to save 200,000 for future expenses. Chapter 213, Traveling Companions. Fortunately, when Lumen raised the bid to 1.4 million, Xingqiu, the second young master of the Feiyun Commerce Guild, didn't continue to bid. This made Nolan breathe a sigh of relief. However, the price for these 6 brilliant diamond gemstones fragments had already inflated by at least 20%, making it a bit of a loss. Darn it, it's all because of that guy at the back. If it weren't for his random bidding, we wouldn't have had to spend so much Mora. Humph. Paimon stomped her foot furiously in mid-air, as if she were stepping on the young man's face. Don't be angry, Paimon. It's just normal bidding. After all, we need it, and so do others, Nolan comforted her with a smile. Humph. Paimon crossed her arms and huffed. Knowing her well, Nolan figured she thought the extra Mora spent could have been used to buy more delicious food. At least with these breakthrough materials, there shouldn't be any problems when it's time to surpass our limits, Lumen said, not feeling too bad about the cost. Since the auction hadn't ended yet, they couldn't collect their items immediately. They had to wait until the end to exchange their Mora with the innkeeper. The next item in the auction was a 3-star longbow. Nolan was somewhat interested, but unfortunately, they didn't have much Mora left. Then an empty vision appeared in the auction. This item is left behind after a vision holder dies. Holding it gives one a chance to awaken it, making it their own vision. Despite the low probability, it garnered a lot of attention from those without visions. The final bid for it reached a staggering 10 million mora, astonishing Nolan and the others. Thinking about it, Nolan mused that if he didn't have his character panel, even knowing he came from another world without a chance of obtaining a vision, he might still hold out hope of being an exception and try to earn enough mora to buy one. High-star weapons, artifacts, and high-quality elemental materials appeared one after another, but unfortunately, Nolan and Lumen couldn't afford any of them as their wallets were nearly empty. The auction finally ended at 10 p.m. Nolan experienced this bustling atmosphere for the first time. As people started to leave, Lumen dragged Nolan to the innkeeper to exchange the 1.4 million mora for the 6 brilliant diamond gemstones fragments she had won. Lumen had borrowed 400,000 mora from him, but she quickly repaid it, with Nolan even giving her an additional 100,000. This was because she gave him the Thunder Jade they received from the Five-Blade Sect leader Zhao Kuo as thanks for their help. The Thunder Jade was a 4-star quality electro-elemental material worth about 1 million mora. As it was shared between the two of them, each received 500,000 mora. Now, they handed the entire amount to Nolan, and he added 100,000, making it fair. In summary, both their wallets were nearly empty now. Nolan had only 200,000 mora left, and Lumen had only 100,000, barely enough to pay the rent to Eula. The trio, especially Paimon, suddenly felt the urgency of needing mora. Would she starve at this rate? No, that was absolutely unacceptable. Paimon urged the two to quickly think of a plan. Reluctantly, Nolan and Lumen decided to temporarily postpone their swordsmanship practice and return to their room to immediately start discussing the design of the bicycle. The sooner they finished it, the sooner they could sell it at a high price in Liyue Harbor and recoup some of their losses. As they were about to head back, the young man who had bid against them walked over, accompanied by two attendants who seemed to be from the Feiyun Commerce Guild. "Good evening, everyone," Xing Kaiyu greeted them with a polite smile, waving his hand. "What do you want? If you're looking for a fight, we're not afraid of you." Paimon, seeing them approach, assumed they were here to cause trouble for not winning the bidding. She retreated behind Lumen, hands on her hips, and spoke unceremoniously. Nolan and Lumen also looked at them curiously. "Oh, you misunderstand. I am Xing Kaiyu. I noticed you all have a chivalrous demeanor, and I simply wanted to make your acquaintance," Xing Kaiyu explained after a brief moment of surprise at Paimon's reaction. "Xing Kaiyu? That name sounds familiar." Paimon pondered, feeling it was familiar but unable to place it. "Are you Sun Yu's junior disciple?" Lumen asked, crossing her arms and raising her pale right hand to her chin thoughtfully. "Oh? You know my senior brother?" Xing Kaiyu was slightly surprised. "We met him a few days ago. He mentioned you briefly, saying you are the most outstanding disciple of the Gehua clan," Lumen explained. Nolan didn't mention the letter, thinking it was unnecessary now that they had met Xing Kaiyu in person. It was better not to risk any misunderstanding by bringing it up. "You're too kind. Being called the most outstanding disciple is a bit much," Xing Kaiyu replied modestly, despite the title being true. "If I had known you were friends of my senior brother, I wouldn't have bid against you for those materials. My apologies." Xing Kaiyu lowered his hands hidden in his flared sleeves, looking a bit embarrassed. "It's no problem. In fact, it's better this way. It would have been more complicated if we had to show leniency because of our acquaintance," Nolan said with a smile. He then introduced himself. "I'm Nolan, and these are Lumen and Paimon. It's an honor to meet you all," Xing Kaiyu nodded and smiled. "You're heading to Liyue Harbor as well, right? Why not join our caravan tomorrow morning?" "Really? You're offering us a ride?" Paimon asked, eyes wide, her impression of Xing Kaiyu improving. "Yes, our Feiyun Commerce Guild is transporting goods back to Liyue Harbor from Mondstadt. Since we're going the same way, we might as well travel together. It'll be nice to have some company for conversation," Xing Kaiyu said with a smile, spreading his hands. "Of course, we'd be happy to," Nolan agreed readily. "Great, we'll be leaving at 6 a.m. sharp. Please be ready by then," Xing Kaiyu said, then bid them farewell, agreeing to continue their chat the next day. "He seems like a chatterbox," Paimon said as she watched them disappear from sight, spreading her hands. "Paimon, that's not the right term. He probably just enjoys making friends. Come on, let's get back and work on the bicycle design," Nolan said with a smile. "Yes, but first, let's activate the teleport waypoint in the inn's reception hall while there are fewer people around." It'll make coming back here much more convenient, Lumen suggested, swinging her legs encased in over-the-knee white high-heeled boots as she walked. Good idea, Nolan and Paimon agreed. As they walked up the stairs of Wangshu Inn, they spotted the teleport waypoint on the platform outside the reception hall. Due to the crowd earlier, they hadn't activated it to avoid drawing attention. Chapter 214, The Conqueror of Demons. Wangshu Inn, on the platform outside the reception hall. When Nolan and the others arrived, they found the area nearly empty. It was already 10 p.m., and most people were likely resting in their rooms, preparing for an early departure the next day. However, the inn's owner, Vergoldet, was still at the reception desk. Since she could easily notice any anomalies when activating the teleport waypoint, Lumen decided to inform her beforehand to avoid any misunderstandings. Upon hearing that they could activate these strange devices, Vergoldet was a bit surprised and expressed her curiosity to watch. Hehe, of course, no problem, said Paimon, nodding with a grin. The group returned to the edge of the platform. Lumen stepped forward with her graceful right leg and extended her pale hand to the teleport waypoint. As expected, the waypoint, which was connected to its base and emitting a red glow, seemed to be infused with some kind of energy, causing it to slowly float. The melancholic red light turned into a soothing blue. Now it would be much easier to travel to Wangshu Inn. As Nolan was thinking this, he suddenly felt someone watching him from behind. He quickly turned around and saw a small figure standing on the rooftop under the moonlight. The moonlight was positioned just behind the figure's head, casting their face and entire front side into shadow, making them unrecognizable. Lumen and Paimon, noticing Nolan's sudden reaction, also saw the figure on the rooftop. Wah! Paimon was startled and quickly hid behind the golden-haired girl, muttering to herself, "Don't eat me, don't eat me." She seemed to think the figure on the roof was some kind of monster. "Who are you?" Lumen shouted, her beautiful golden eyebrows slightly furrowed, and her soft lips parted as she called out. "Humph!" The figure on the rooftop, still obscured by shadow, did not respond. After a few seconds of silence, they let out a cold snort and disappeared. "Did we scare them off?" Paimon asked, surprised. "They just didn't want to deal with us," Lumen said, her fair face showing a hint of helplessness. Nolan watched the figure disappear and then turned to Vergoldet, asking, "Do you know who that was?" "Yes, I do," Vergoldet nodded, smiling calmly. "Hey!" Paimon exclaimed in surprise. "You know them?" Lumen's amber eyes widened in slight confusion. She had thought it might have been an enemy. "His name is Xiao. He's an adeptus known as the Conqueror of Demons and Bane of all evil. He appears wherever there are evil beings causing trouble," Vergoldet explained, crossing her arms thoughtfully. "An adeptus?" Lumen and Paimon were both slightly taken aback by this revelation. Nolan, however, had already guessed who the figure was upon seeing him. "Not a charlatan, but a real adeptus?" Paimon asked further. As soon as they arrived at Stonegate, they encountered a self-proclaimed half-immortal swindler, so Paimon found it hard to believe at the moment. "Of course, but you shouldn't say such things in front of Xiao. He might use his adeptal arts to turn you into a turtle," hehe, Vergoldet chuckled. "Ah, sorry. I don't want to become a turtle," Paimon exclaimed, thinking about how the figure had suddenly vanished earlier, making her somewhat believe he was indeed an adeptus. Does that mean he mistook us for monsters and appeared to confront us?" Nolan subconsciously touched his forehead. "Possibly," Vergoldet laughed again. "But I'm really surprised you can activate these devices." "Hehe, it's actually a device that uses the ley lines for teleportation," Paimon explained briefly to the innkeeper. "I see. So, from now on, if you find another waypoint, you can teleport back to Wangshu Inn." "That's really convenient," Vergoldet marveled. After lighting up the teleport waypoint, with nothing else to do, Nolan and the others returned to their guest room, basking in the warm yellow light. "Speaking of which, Nolan, weren't you looking for an adeptus?" "You just saw one, but unfortunately, he left too quickly," Paimon said as she flew in last and closed the door. "In Liyue, they say you need fate to meet an adeptus. Even though we encountered one, we didn't have enough fate, so we were just humped and left," Lumen teased, her eyes curving like crescent moons as she glanced at Nolan. "That's true. But I believe we'll meet other adepti eventually, so there's no need to worry," Nolan said, sitting down at the wooden chair by the table. He took out some paper and a quill, then continued, Alright, since we're broke, let's discuss the design for the bicycle. Sure, I already have a clear idea about it, Lumen replied. She smoothed her hands down her thighs, ensuring her skirt stayed in place as she sat across from Nolan. Oh, please share your insights. Nolan leaned back in his chair and made a gesture for her to proceed, accidentally kicking Lumen's feet under the table. Sorry. Nolan quickly retracted his feet and sat up straight. Lumen gave him a glare, then picked up the quill and began outlining her thoughts on the paper. She divided the bicycle into 5 parts: the main frame, braking system, chain drive system, wheels, and seat. As long as they could design these parts, they should be able to assemble a bicycle. Since neither of them were experts, they aimed for simplicity, just something functional. Watching them discuss the bike, Paimon tried to follow along but soon found herself completely lost. Her head started to feel dizzy. Ugh, my head is spinning. You guys figure it out. I'm going to sleep, Paimon said, ultimately giving in and collapsing onto the bed. Nolan and Lumen didn't work for much longer, only managing to draft a basic design for the frame before deciding to sleep. The frame was triangular, modeled after an early, sturdy bicycle from Earth. It wasn't too difficult to copy. Note: the bicycle design is for plot purposes. Please don't delve too deeply into the technical details. End of chapter. Sparkle sparkle sparkle. Support me on Patreon, read up to 20+ advanced chapters there. Patreon.com/redx43. Sparkle sparkle sparkle. Comment. 7 comment. Vote. Chapter 215, Chapter 215, Calm. The small room was illuminated by candlelight. Nolan laid the mat, provided by the inn in advance, on the narrow wooden floor between the bed and the wooden door. Lumen sat on the other side of the bed, her left leg, encased in over-the-knee white boots, resting on her right knee. She grabbed the sides of the boot's sole, wiggling it to loosen it before finally pulling it off. With the boot removed, her leg, wrapped in sheer white stockings, was revealed. The soft glow of the candlelight caressed her calf and ankle, the smooth skin seeming ready to burst through the delicate weave. She slid her left leg down the length of the long boot, her toe lightly touching the wooden floor. She then removed the right boot in the same manner, placing both boots under the table. Next, she started to remove the long sleeves from her arms. Just as she raised her hands, exposing her white armpits, to untie the ribbon of her dress behind her neck, she suddenly remembered there was a man present. Though she was wearing an underdress and bloomers, it still felt improper to be seen by a man while undressing. Nolan. Lumen called out hesitantly, a hint of uncertainty in her ember eyes. Nolan, almost done laying out the mat, turned his head upon hearing her call, looking puzzled. What's up? Well, Lumen averted her gaze, fiddling nervously with her white stockings, her hands resting on her knees. She bit her lip and said, I need to undress. Could you not look for a moment? She then looked back at the only man in the room. All right, don't worry. I won't peek, Nolan replied with a smile. Despite being somewhat flirtatious, he wasn't the type to watch a girl undress without permission except for Fiskal, with whom he had a romantic relationship. Okay, please turn around then, Lumen trusted Nolan and nodded slightly. Nolan complied. Once she was sure he wasn't looking, Lumen untied the ribbon connected to her collar. Without the ribbon holding it up, the dress slid down from her upper body, revealing her white stomach. She placed her legs on the bed and stood up slightly to fully remove the dress, casually hanging it on the front of the table. Next, she hooked her thumbs into the elastic bands of her over-the-knee stockings, sliding them down to completely reveal her white legs under her bloomers. After tossing the stockings onto her dress, she slipped under the thin blanket, covering herself before saying, I'm done. Okay. Nolan nodded and continued setting up the mat. Seeing that it was getting late, he blew out the candle inside the lampshade, plunging the room into darkness as they settled down to sleep. Number Chapter 216, Calm, Seeking More reads. In the dead of night. Moonlight streamed through the window, making the room not completely pitch dark. Lumen, sleeping soundly, felt a slight pain in her shoulder, causing her to wake up groggily. Feeling something strange, she turned her head and saw that Paimon, perhaps dreaming of something delicious, was nibbling on her shoulder. Lumen showed a look of disdain mixed with helplessness, then turned over to sleep on her side, avoiding Paimon's grip on her arm. Just as she was about to fall back asleep, she suddenly felt a dryness in her throat. Instinctively, she pulled out some water from her inventory to take a sip. However, lying under the blanket, her body was lazy, and her mind wasn't fully awake. She unscrewed the bottle cap and brought the bottle to her mouth while still lying down. As her soft lips touched the bottle's rim, some water dribbled from the corner of her mouth. Below the edge of the bed, Nolan was sleeping soundly, breathing steadily. Inevitably, the water was going to spill on his face and wake him up. Realizing this, Lumen instantly woke up, silently cursing, "Oh no! It wouldn't be good to disturb Nolan's sleep due to her carelessness." Thinking quickly, she had no better idea but to swiftly flick her hand and use a slight wind element to disperse the water before it could fall on his face. Phew! Just as Lumen succeeded in resolving her accidental mishap and breathed a sigh of relief, her body, being too close to the edge of the bed, lost balance slightly and she toppled out of the blanket, landing right on top of Nolan. Ugh! Half asleep, Nolan felt something heavy pressing down on him, causing him to cough lightly. Opening his eyes halfway, he saw a flash of golden hair. "It's little Amy," the name popped into Nolan's mind, and without thinking much, he closed his eyes again. The only person with golden hair who would sleep on top of him was Fiskal, or so his drowsy brain concluded. Subconsciously, he turned to his left, pulling the girl on top of him into his arms and burying his nose in her golden hair, inhaling the faint fragrance as he drifted back to sleep. He had no idea he wasn't at home but in a room at the inn with Lumen. Lumen, now quite bewildered, felt Nolan's hands moving around her back. Her fair face turned bright red with embarrassment. This guy must have mistaken her for Fiskal. She wanted to stop his wandering hands, but her arms and body were tightly held, making it difficult to move. Having no other choice, Lumen didn't want to wake Nolan and let him see her being hugged like this. She began to slowly wriggle backward, hoping to slip out unnoticed. Even though her movements were light and slow, they seemed to catch Nolan's attention. Without fully waking up, his body sensed the girl trying to leave, and he felt a sudden emptiness. Instinctively, his hand slid down her beautifully curved back, touching her soft buttocks with a light pat. He then lifted his right leg, clamping her slender, fair legs, holding her even tighter. "Don't move, sleep well," Nolan murmured softly. Lumen, both ashamed and annoyed, felt her chest, wrapped in a white undergarment, heave up and down. This jerk had touched her butt. Taking a couple of breaths to calm herself, Lumen felt as if she were tied up, barely able to wiggle. With no other options, she bit her lip, stretched her neck close to Nolan's ear, and prepared to wake him up. Just as she parted her soft lips to take a breath and speak, Nolan's lips, suddenly very close, pressed against hers. Chapter 216, Lumen's Sword Intent, 2 in 1 chapter. The deep blue moonlight gently caressed the two figures beside the bed. Lumen's amber eyes widened slightly, she never expected to be kissed so suddenly. This jerk, does he sleep like this with Fiskal every night? Her mind raced with these unfamiliar thoughts. After being kissed for more than 10 seconds, she felt something part her lips and touch her teeth. Realizing what was happening, Lumen quickly lowered her head, breaking the kiss with Nolan. For some reason, after experiencing this unexpected event, Lumen's emotions calmed down. She realized she didn't entirely dislike being kissed by Nolan. Could it be that I like him? No, that can't be it. How could I like this guy? Lumen thought to herself, still uncertain. Suddenly, she felt something soft and moist touch her forehead, something she had just felt with her lips. Nolan was kissing her forehead. Lumen gently wriggled her body but couldn't break free from his embrace. She sighed helplessly and decided to let it be. She didn't believe this guy would hold her so tightly all night. Once he fell into a deep sleep, he'd eventually loosen his grip, and then she could quietly return to bed. That way, he wouldn't find out. Lumen thought to herself, feeling the warmth of Nolan's embrace. Tomorrow, I'll just act like nothing happened. She wasn't ready to deal with Nolan knowing about what happened tonight. Asterisk Lumen has developed good feelings towards you, obtain 600 affection points. Current affection level LV.7, 505/700, asterisk. A notification popped up on Nolan's character panel, but he was asleep and unaware of it. Morning arrived, with the sky just beginning to lighten. A voice, as if from a distance, echoed in his ears. Wake up, it's already morning. Paimon shouted loudly, hovering over Nolan's head. She felt like she had been shouting forever. Nolan rubbed the corners of his eyes, yawned, and slowly opened them. For some reason, he had slept exceptionally well last night, almost like he was at home. It seemed he even dreamt of sleeping with Fiscal, suggesting he missed her a bit after being away for 2 days. "Thank you, Paimon. I heard you, no need to shout any more," he said as he propped himself up, noticing Lumen, who was already awake and dressed, sitting by the bed. He asked with slight confusion. "You don't seem well rested. Did I snore last night? I shouldn't have." He didn't recall having a habit of snoring. Lumen tugged at her white sleeves, glanced at Nolan, and said calmly. "No, the moonlight was too bright, and I had trouble sleeping. I guess I'm just not used to this place." This jerk, he held her for at least an hour before finally letting go and changing positions, giving her a chance to crawl back into bed. But after that, Lumen couldn't stop thinking about him kissing her, which kept her from falling asleep. Open eyes, it's him. Closed eyes, it's still him. Her restless mind kept her awake, leading to her fatigue. "I see. You could have just closed the curtains," Nolan thought silently while nodding in agreement. "Get up quickly. It's already 5:30, and the caravan is about to leave." Lumen took out a golden pocket watch, glanced at the time, then snapped it shut and put it away. "You're right." Nolan nodded slightly and began to help Lumen and Paimon pack up their things in the guest room. A few minutes passed. Nolan and his companions took their keys and went to the reception hall of the Wangshu Inn to check out with Vergoldet. They retrieved their 10,000 mora deposit and headed towards the plaza below. There were many early risers, densely packed like black ants scurrying back and forth with their food. It was easy for Nolan and his friends to spot the Feiyun Commerce Guild caravan on the dirt road outside the plaza of the Wangshu Inn. This was because the carriages had flags with the words Feiyun written on them. There were at least 7 or 8 four-wheeled carriages with such flags. They had no idea what was being transported, likely crafts, regional spices, or perhaps even food, as these were the common goods suitable for long-distance transport that also yielded profits. As they approached, they saw a young man with dark blue hair waving to them from the last carriage of the convoy. "Good morning, Xingqiu." Paimon, having forgotten about yesterday's intense bidding scene between Lumen and Xingqiu, greeted him with a smile. It was obvious why she was so cheerful. She was definitely pleased because Xingqiu had offered them a free ride, saving them from the exhausting journey. Typical Paimon, always practical. Nolan found this slightly amusing. "Good morning, everyone. Our guild members are not all here yet, so please wait a moment," Xingqiu said, smiling and leaning against the side of the carriage. It didn't take long, about 5 or 6 minutes later, everyone had arrived, and it was around 6 a.m. The convoy's workers fed the horses some more hay, and then they set off. The wooden wheels creaked softly on the uneven road. Each carriage was not fully loaded, leaving some space at the very back of the carriage, just enough for a few people to sit. This way, the entire team, including the carriage drivers, numbering over 20, wouldn't all have to walk outside. Most of them were guards for the caravan, protecting against potential threats from monsters or treasure-hoarding gangs. If there was no place to sit and they had to walk, they might get tired. What if danger struck when they were exhausted? Thus, even though it meant transporting fewer goods, they had to leave some space for people to sit. Earning a bit less and losing everything due to a heist, no need to guess which was the better option. "By the way, Xingqiu, aren't you the second young master of the guild? Why do you need to personally escort the caravan?" Paimon asked, sitting on the goods inside the carriage, puzzled. In her understanding, a young master of a guild should just stay at home and count money. Due to the limited space, Nolan and Lumen, who were sitting closely together on the wooden plank, also looked curiously at Xingqiu opposite them. "It's because this shipment contains top-quality fabrics from Mondstadt, each bolt worth tens of thousands of mora. If we get robbed, the loss would be huge. The guild can't rest easy, so they sent me, the second young master with some combat skills, to join the escort team." "Ugh, I haven't even had time to buy the new novels at the bookstore," Xingqiu said, looking bored. "Hey, does that mean this journey might be dangerous?" Paimon asked, her starry eyes wide open. "Not necessarily. Most treasure hoarders wouldn't dare mess with us when they see the Feiyun flag. As for monsters, we might not encounter them at all." Xingqiu shook his head, arms crossed. "If we encounter danger, we'll help out too," Lumen said, her legs together, left hand resting on her knee wrapped in white boots, and nudged Nolan's arm with her right hand. "Yet, consider us temporary guards," Nolan said, leaning against the carriage and resting his hand on his leg. Since the journey to Liyue Harbor would take more than 10 days, he felt it was only right to contribute since Xingqiu was willing to bring them along. "Thank you very much," Xingqiu smiled and nodded. "By the way, it looks like this is your first time going to Liyue Harbor. You might be unfamiliar with the place. How about I tell you about it?" "Hehe, we'd love that, especially if you talk about all the good food," Paimon said excitedly, clenching her tiny fists. During their journey with the Feiyun Commerce Guild to Liyue Harbor, Nolan and his friends didn't stay on the carriage all the time. They would get down to walk and practice swordsmanship. Xingqiu found this quite interesting and joined them, sharing his Gehua swordsmanship. Nolan, already skilled in advanced swordsmanship, easily grasped the basics of Gehua swordsmanship and Lumen's self-taught ordinary-level swordsmanship, recollection of the past. Lumen and Xingqiu also learned a lot, especially Xingqiu, who had reached a state of one method leads to all methods. His understanding of swordsmanship wasn't much inferior to Nolan's. Maybe this is what they call a genius. Nolan, being an ordinary person, needed a cheat to barely surpass such a genius. This diversity in people's abilities was simply how things were. At night, when the caravan camped for rest, Nolan and Lumen continued discussing the bicycle design blueprint. After a week, they managed to design the frame and wheels. During this time, Nolan found some moments to upgrade the Gehua swordsmanship to the maximum level. He gained an extraordinary trait called Gehua, which allowed his attacks to be imbued with a sharp dark sword glow, capable of easily cutting through steel. After integrating it into the royal one-handed sword technique, it became royal swordsmanship, Gehua with just the additional extraordinary trait. It didn't transform into a secret-level swordsmanship. It seemed he also needed to integrate Lumen's recollection of the past to achieve that. Unfortunately, he only had about 2,000 Adventure EXP left, not enough to max it out for now. Another week passed. The caravan of the Feiyun Commerce Guild crossed the Gailai Plains and was about to reach Liyue Harbor. Along the way, they encountered some treasure hoarders, but they kept their distance and did not dare approach. Even in Liyue, Feiyun Commerce Guild was a very famous organization, and it had a considerable deterrent effect. Although the treasure hoarders were a vast organization spread across the entire Teyvat continent and included some powerful individuals, their internal chaos and lack of organization made them a true rabble. No other term would describe them better. Apart from this, the large size of the caravan also attracted some monsters, mainly hilly churls. However, when they were few in number, they didn't dare attack. Despite their limited intelligence, hilly churls could instinctively judge their chances, much like a mouse recognizing it couldn't win against a cat and sensibly retreating. These hilly churls, seeing they were outnumbered by the caravan, made the rational choice not to attack. They were rational, but Nolan had no intention of letting them off. If they didn't rob this caravan now, they would still rob others in the future. Since he saw them, he wouldn't let them go and risk harm to others. Plus, it was an opportunity to earn some Adventure EXP. The monsters they encountered were not just hilly churls. They also faced ruin guards wandering from some ancient ruins. Unsurprisingly, Nolan took them all down with a single arrow. By the time they were nearing Liyue Harbor, he had accumulated over 6,000 Adventure EXP, enough to upgrade Recollection of the Past to the maximum level. Adventure EXP, minus 4,499. Recollection of the Past LV.1, 1/100, Recollection of the Past LV.10, Memory/Fissionable. After reaching the maximum level, Lumen's sword technique, Recollection of the Past, gained an extraordinary trait called Memory. The effect of this trait was that hitting an enemy with this sword technique would evoke a significant memory for the enemy, causing mental interference, a form of psychological attack. If the enemy's willpower was not strong enough, they would get trapped in their memories, making them vulnerable. As Nolan sat in the carriage, he continued to look at the can be integrated note that appeared with the skill, a slight smile forming on his lips. Integrating this with royal swordsmanship, Gehua would naturally result in it evolving into a secret-level sword technique, given it would be the fifth extraordinary trait. It was like getting a guaranteed rare drop after enough draws, reaching the threshold where quantity changes into quality. There was a high probability of it working. Without hesitation, Nolan chose the two sword techniques and began the integration. The next second, the two skills on his character panel twisted and entwined as if they were being drawn into an invisible vortex. Soon, a new skill appeared on the character panel. Lumen's Sword Intent, Secret LV.1, 1/1000. Hey? This seems a bit odd. Why is the skill named after Lumen? Could it be related to the recollection of the past learned from her? Before Nolan could ponder further, knowledge about Lumen's sword intent appeared in his mind. This sword technique was quite different from typical fixed-form techniques. As its name suggested, it was a sword intent comprehended from long-term practice and use of the sword. Even without a sword in hand, as long as there was a sword in the heart, it could be easily activated. Of course, such a Lumen's sword intent wouldn't have the weapon's enhancement, reducing its power significantly. When activated, a large golden outline of Lumen would appear behind Nolan, completely formed by sword intent, holding a golden longsword and slashing out golden sword energy. This energy inherited the original extraordinary traits, easily cutting through steel and triggering the enemy's memories. However, since the skill was currently only at level 1, the golden sword energy could only travel about 10 meters. After absorbing all this new knowledge, Nolan was delighted. This skill was incredibly powerful, possibly even stronger than Captain Jean's wind blade. But using it might be a bit awkward, especially in front of Lumen. Activating Lumen's sword intent would summon a large golden sword intent shadow of Lumen, giving the impression of a devoted swordsman whose sword intent takes the form of his beloved girl. Chapter 217, Liyue Harbor, 2 in 1 chapter. Forget it, it doesn't really matter. After all, he does indeed like Lumen. If she brings it up, confessing naturally wouldn't be bad. However, it's better to wait until Lumen's affection for him increases a bit more. After all, Lumen already knew about Fiscal. If her affection level wasn't high enough, who knew if she would accept his confession? Thinking this, Nolan subconsciously checked Lumen's affection level towards him. Affection level LV.7, 505/700. Wait a minute. Nolan widened his eyes. He remembered it was only level 6 before, how had it almost reached level 8, with an additional 600 points out of nowhere? He quickly checked the latest record on the character panel showing an increase of 600 affection points. The timestamp was from 2 weeks ago. That was when he and Lumen were resting in the same room at Wangshu Inn. Nolan vaguely remembered dreaming of little Amy. Not necessarily Fiscal just because she had blonde hair. As if confirming something, Nolan sneaked a glance at the blonde girl outside the carriage, who said she felt tired from sitting too long and wanted to walk. No way, could that not have been a dream? There was no other explanation, and as for why she hadn't mentioned it for half a month, it was probably due to embarrassment. After all, he vaguely remembered kissing her in the end. Fortunately, she already had a high level of affection for him. After going through all that, instead of being angry, her affection actually increased. Thinking this way, Lumen probably didn't mind becoming a couple with him. She just hadn't made up her mind yet. Although Lumen wasn't as shy as Sucrose or as tsundere as Fiscal, her personality was rather calm, and she didn't seem like the type to confess her feelings outright. It seemed he would have to be the one to take the initiative. But now wasn't the right time. It would be better to wait until her affection level increased a bit more. Better to be cautious. What if it was just his wishful thinking? Nolan took a deep breath, temporarily suppressing his wild thoughts, and looked at his now quite changed character panel. Name, Nolan Walker. Level, LV.40, 0/4000. Race, human. Title, Honorary Knight. Innate talent, Entangling Affection. Skills. Divine Generation Archery, Arcane Level Technique LV.1, 1/5000. Elemental Skill, Dandelion Shield LV.5, 0/5000. Elemental Burst, Windwheel Aster Barrier LV.5, 0/5000. Anmo Manipulation LV.3, 1/3000. Wind Pressure Sword, Secret Art Level Technique LV.2, 0/2000. Concealment Form, Secret Art Level Technique LV.1, 0/1000. Arrow of World's Descent, Secret Art Level Technique LV.1, 1/1000. Lumen's Sword Intent, Secret Art Level Technique LV.1, 1/1000. Marital Arts LV.2, 0/200. Specialties. Descender. Maiden Savior. Monster Slayer. Abundant Life. Gospel of the Sky. North Wind. Spiritual Threads. Adventure EXP, 3534. Aside from combat, there were no basic level skills anymore. But the rest of the skills required a significant amount of Adventure EXP to upgrade. The remaining 3,534 Adventure EXP should be saved for leveling up. For now, he had enough skills to use. Around noon, the Feiyun Commerce Guild's caravan rounded a bend and, skirting the mountain, finally caught sight of the sea. Shifting their gaze slightly to the right, they could see Liyue Harbor, built against the mountains and facing the sea. The terrain of this city slopes gently upward from Sea of Clouds on the left, with the distant end nestled against Tianheng Mountain. The buildings in Liyue Harbor are primarily grand pavilions with tiled roofs, exuding both elegance and a sense of rich history. The architectural style is consistent, with the spacing between buildings just right, not too dense nor too sparse. Standing on a hillside in the outskirts, Nolan and his companions could see numerous ships docked at the port, busily loading and unloading goods, with workers bustling about on the docks. Looking further out towards Sea of Clouds, they saw a dense array of sails approaching. Except for the foremost row of ships, the rest were so tightly packed that their hulls were obscured. Such a bustling scene hinted at the city's prosperity. "This is incredible!" Paimon exclaimed, flying in the air and leaning forward as if lying on an invisible table, her hands stretched downward along her sides. "It's my first time seeing such a sight," Nolan remarked with a bit of awe. Sea breezes wafted up the cliffs, gently stirring Lumen's diagonally cut skirt, the over-the-knee boots revealing her snow-white thighs that glimmered in the light like the sea. Pressing a finger thoughtfully to her soft lips, she said, "With such a large volume of trade, it must be one of the few ports of this scale on the entire Teyvat continent." "Of course. This is Liyue's capital, Liyue Harbor, known by many names like the City of Thousands of Sails, the Commercial Capital, and the City of Contracts. It is undeniably the most prosperous city in the world," Xingqiu said, stopping with the caravan to admire the scene he had grown up with and found routine. As a local of Liyue, he felt a bit of pride seeing how astonished the travelers were. Even the familiar sights suddenly felt novel again. But looking at Nolan, whose appearance somewhat suggested he was also from Liyue, Xingqiu was puzzled. How could someone from Liyue be seeing these common sights for the first time? Was he perhaps from a remote village making his first trip to the city? Xingqiu took out a paper fan, deftly unfolding it with one hand. Despite facing the sea breeze, he gracefully fanned himself while pondering. "It seems we've come to the right place this time," Nolan said, smiling happily. The cultural atmosphere of Liyue Harbor reminded him very much of the ancient times of his homeland on Earth. Arriving here, just seeing the ancient-style buildings in the distance gave Nolan a familiar feeling, like coming home. "Hehe, after learning about all the delicious food in Liyue from Xingqiu, I can't wait to have a feast," Paimon said, her eyes full of anticipation as she tore her gaze away from the distant sailboats. "No way, Paimon, we need to earn some mora first," Lumen reminded her, knowing they only had 100,000 mora left. A big meal would take up half of that, and they still needed to rent a place in Liyue Harbor. "All right." Paimon understood but couldn't help feeling a bit disappointed. "There's no need to worry," Xingqiu reassured them. "As the saying goes, there's a way to eat well regardless of your budget. Besides big restaurants like Xinyu Kiosk and Liyue Pavilion, there are also smaller, affordable places like Wanman Restaurant where the food quality rivals that of the larger establishments. Why don't you first find a place to stay in Liyue Harbor, and tonight, allow me to host you all at Wanman Restaurant?" "Wow, really? Xingqiu, you're treating us to dinner." Paimon's starry eyes seemed to sparkle even more. "Of course. Since it's your first time in Liyue Harbor, it's only proper for me, as a local, to show some hospitality. Please be sure to arrive by 6 in the evening," Xingqiu said seriously. Nolan and Lumen exchanged glances. With Xingqiu being so enthusiastic, they couldn't find any reason to refuse. They agreed happily. After setting the dinner plan, Xingqiu caught up with the caravan. Even though he wasn't required to report on the goods, he still needed to check in with his brother and father. Having taken in enough of the harbor's scenery, Nolan, Lumen and Paimon started along the road towards the city of Liyue Harbor. "Once we're in the city, our first priority is to find a place to stay, then ask about the Adventurers Guild to pick up some commissions and earn some mora, right?" Lumen asked, glancing at Nolan with her ember eyes. "Yeah, being adventurers is still our best way to make money. Also, our bicycle design is almost complete. We need to find a blacksmith here to see if they can make the parts we need to assemble a prototype," Nolan nodded. Do you really think this bicycle will make that much money? Paimon asked, flying alongside them with a curious expression. She didn't understand why they were so confident. The three of them passed through the main gate of Liyue Harbor, where two sharp-eyed Millelith soldiers on either side briefly scrutinized them before looking away, finding nothing unusual. Although Liyue Harbor was bustling and filled with people from various nations, Nolan and Lumen didn't stand out particularly. It was probably Paimon, the little floating fairy, who drew the Millelith's attention. Nolan pondered for a moment before addressing Paimon's earlier question as he faced the bustling pedestrians on the street. You see, even in Liyue Harbor, people still primarily travel by foot. Those with a bit more money can ride in those human-powered rickshaws. But regardless, these modes of transportation are still too slow. The bicycle, on the other hand, is an extremely convenient means of transportation that has stood the test of time for over a century in our world. With it, people can travel several times faster, freeing up time for both work and leisure activities. The cost isn't high, so most people can afford one. If we can mass-produce it, it's bound to sell like hotcakes. He was very confident about this. Oh, so we're about to change the world. Paimon's eyes lit up, suddenly excited by whatever she imagined. It's not that dramatic, Nolan said, scratching his cheek as his earlier enthusiasm cooled. He wasn't aiming to change the world just to earn some mora. All right, you two, stop dreaming. We haven't even started yet, Lumen said, her white fingers pushing through her golden hair as she spoke helplessly. Let's find out how to rent a place. They walked over the wooden arch bridge behind the gate. Aside from the sound of the stream flowing under the bridge, they also heard agents shouting, cheap rentals available. They didn't even need to ask. A middle-aged man with a slightly thin face and defined bone structure had already noticed their need for a place to stay, thanks to his years of experience. He quickly approached them with enthusiasm. Welcome to the bustling Liyue Harbor. You don't have a place to stay yet, right? Ours Hixing residence offers a beautiful environment, quiet and pleasant, with 3 meals a day. Both short-term and long-term rentals are available. That sounds good, but you haven't mentioned the rent, Paimon said, shaking her head after a moment of thought. Haha, you can come with me to check out the place first. I'm sure you'll be satisfied, and Ming, the agent, felt a bit troubled. He always feared potential tenants who asked about the rent right away since theirs Hixing residence was indeed slightly above the market average. Never mind, we'll ask someone else. Paimon's gaze shifted past the man to other agents in the distance. Nolan and Lumen nodded in agreement. Wait. Ours Hixing residence might be a bit pricey, but our environment and service are much better. And Ming quickly provided a brief introduction. Short-term rentals are 150,000 mora per week, with a minimum of 3 weeks, and long-term rentals start at 550,000 mora per month for at least 3 months. Well, we're not familiar with the rental prices in Liyue Harbor, so let's ask around first, Nolan said, deciding not to agree immediately and opting to compare prices elsewhere. That price was way too high, far beyond their budget. They didn't even need a long-term rental. Once they found a teleport waypoint in Liyue Harbor, they could easily return to Mondstadt's Fountain Plaza. The plaza was just an hour's walk from the house Eula rented to them, and using a wind glider from a high point could cut that time in half. So, finding a cheap place to stay for a few days and then locating and activating the teleport waypoint would suffice. However, Liyue Harbor was so crowded that they didn't want to draw attention to themselves. Even if they found a waypoint, they would have to wait for the right moment to use it. All right, and Ming said, adjusting his black hair, knowing he couldn't force them if they weren't interested. Business had to be mutual. Next, Nolan and the others asked several other agents. Although their rentals were not as expensive as the high-end's Hixing residence, renting would still drain their combined 300,000 mora, leaving them struggling for meals. Thinking back, Eula's rent of 100,000 mora for that small courtyard was practically a symbolic fee, even though it partly stemmed from her family's bad reputation, which made it hard to rent out. But such a deal was impossible to find in Liyue. Why don't we check the Adventurers Guild? I remember Mondstadt's guild has temporary lodging for adventurers who just arrived and haven't found a place yet. Maybe Liyue Harbor has something similar. Nolan suggested. Temporary lodging would be perfect for their situation. Chapter 218, Exorcist, 2 in 1 chapter. That's fine. We'll need to visit the Adventurers Guild eventually, Lumen said, folding her arms under her chest, slightly lifting her round, soft curves and nodding. Hehe, I wonder what kind of exciting commissions Liyue's Adventurers Guild has in store, Paimon said expectantly. Nolan smiled slightly at her words. It's probably just different locations, the content of the commissions won't differ much. The group left the wooden arch bridge near the gate. After asking for directions to the Adventurers Guild, they began walking toward it. Like Mondstadt, Liyue Harbor's streets were patrolled by many Millilith soldiers. This ensured that even with a large population, the city was well managed, orderly, and free of major incidents. The Adventurers Guild was a bit far from the gate, and it took some time, asking for directions along the way, before they finally saw the Liyue Harbor branch from a distance. They were still walking on a wooden arch bridge, though smaller than the one near the gate. Hey, look to the left. There's a teleport waypoint in front of that tree, Paimon said, flying in the air and noticing the device faster than Nolan and Lumen. Looks like we're in luck. We don't even have to search for it, it appeared right in front of us, Lumen said, a smile spreading across her fair face. There are a lot of people around now. Let's come back tonight and check it out, Nolan suggested, not showing much surprise as he had anticipated this. Based on his memory of the game's Liyue Harbor map, there were 2 teleport waypoints within the city, located at each end. One of them was along the route from the gate to the Adventurers Guild. Real life wasn't a game, and activating a teleport waypoint in front of so many people would definitely draw attention, even though these waypoints were a common sight. Both Nolan and Lumen preferred to avoid unnecessary trouble and attention, even if it meant not using the waypoint immediately. If they activated it stealthily, people might later notice the waypoint had mysteriously turned blue, but as long as they weren't caught in the act, it wouldn't be a big deal. If they were seen teleporting, they could simply claim it was some spatial magic technique. However, being seen too often increased the risk of exposure. Unfortunately, his concealment form skill couldn't make others invisible along with him, otherwise, this wouldn't be an issue. That skill would be greatly enhanced at max level, potentially expanding its functionality. Maybe it would allow making others invisible too. He decided to prioritize upgrading concealment form along with his own level. Nolan pondered as he walked, almost appearing to be in a daze. They crossed a plaza with scenic pools and easily spotted the Adventurers Guild reception above the street. Lumen's left foot, clad in knee-high white boots that highlighted her elegant legs, stepped lightly onto the wooden steps. As she lifted her leg, her snow-white thigh peeked from under her skirt, reflecting a bit of the afternoon sunlight, almost more dazzling than the sun itself. Meanwhile, Paimon eagerly flew ahead to the reception desk. As she looked at the receptionist and was about to greet her, her mouth opened in shock. Hey! Catherine! What are you doing here? Hearing Paimon's surprised exclamation, Lumen quickened her pace and ran over to look inside the reception area. A white headscarf, black hair, a gentle smile, and a maid-style dress with green trim on a white base. Wasn't this Catherine, the receptionist at the Adventurers Guild in Mondstadt? Seeing this, Lumen's amber eyes widened slightly, and her soft lips parted a little in surprise. Could Catherine also teleport? Nolan, who knew the truth, wasn't very surprised as he walked up behind Lumen. Ad Astra Abyssosk. Welcome to the Adventurers Guild, Catherine greeted, her hands clasped in front of her as usual, with a smile. She continued, everyone, please don't be surprised. After all, there's Amy in the reception of the Adventurers Guild in every nation. What do you mean? Can you duplicate yourself? Paimon felt a bit confused. Not exactly, but close enough, Catherine replied with a smile. Now, let's get back to the main topic. Otherwise, we'll delay other adventurers submitting their commissions, she added. All right, but it's really intriguing. Paimon said, looking very curious. Hehe, we are bionic dolls, which is why we look identical and are deployed in every nation's reception, Catherine explained, smiling. This wasn't a major secret. Many adventurers who had traveled internationally and seen multiple Catherines had already guessed the truth. They were more likely to believe in bionic dolls than in something like septuplets or advanced cloning. I see, Lumen nodded, choosing to accept the explanation. By the way, Miss Catherine, does the Adventurers Guild here have temporary accommodations? We've just arrived in Liyue Harbor and haven't found a place to stay yet, Nolan asked, already knowing the answer and not too surprised. Ah, unfortunately, you're a bit late. With the Rite of Dissension happening in 5 days, many adventurers have arrived in Liyue Harbor. The last room was just taken by an adventurer from Fontaine, Catherine said regretfully. Ah, there's no more? Seems like we're a bit unlucky today, Paimon sighed. I didn't expect the Rite of Dissension to attract so many people, Nolan said, his eyes showing some surprise. After all, during that time, the Geo-Archon will appear to guide Liyue's business direction for the coming year. For foreigners dealing with Liyue, understanding the nation's policies promptly is crucial, Catherine explained briefly. All right, we won't disturb you further then, Nolan said after understanding the situation. With no immediate solution, he, Lumen, and Paimon decided to leave. Since they had already located the teleport waypoint, finding accommodations wasn't urgent. He remembered that the blacksmith's shop in Liyue was right next to the Adventurers Guild. This would also be a good opportunity to ask if the blacksmith can craft the various parts needed for the bicycle. Liyue Harbor. Hanfan's Ironmonger's a century-old blacksmith shop. Master Zhang, with his short black hair and square face, was wiping sweat with a towel draped around his neck as he sat down to rest before finishing his work for the day. He glanced at the setting sun. Suddenly, he noticed two young people descending from the Adventurers Guild above a man and a woman. They were accompanied by a small, flying white sprite. Quite an unusual combination. Looking to buy weapons or repair them? Master Zhang asked casually. Hello, boss. We're not here to buy weapons. We'd like to ask if you can craft some mechanical parts for us, Nolan politely inquired. Haha, I'm one of the top blacksmiths in Liyue. There's nothing I can't forge. Just tell me what you need. Master Zhang responded confidently. It's not something too difficult. What we need is actually a sample of a new type of transportation tool we designed, Nolan explained. Once the sample is verified to work, we plan to sell the design. So please make sure not to leak any details of the design while crafting it. Nolan was careful to explain in advance to avoid any potential harm to their interests. Humph, kid, integrity is what I value most. I've never leaked any designs, even for 4-star weapon blueprints. Besides, our Geo-Archon is a god of contracts. If he knew I breached a contract, I'd face punishment from the people of the Geo-Archon, and the General Affairs Office wouldn't just sit by. So you can rest assured. Master Zhang said with a hint of displeasure, showing that he was annoyed by the suspicion. As someone who prided himself on integrity, he hated being doubted. Sorry, I trust you since we're here, Nolan smiled and handed over the design blueprints he and Lumen had completed. Here is the new type of transportation tool we need you to craft. Please take a look and let us know the approximate forging cost. Let me see. Master Zhang was curious about this new type of transportation tool. He took the blueprints and examined the details carefully. Iron frame, bearings, brake and traction cables, wheels, so this is a bicycle? What a great idea! After reviewing the basic content, Master Zhang nodded and said, the materials needed are just iron and wood, so they won't be too expensive. However, crafting the bearings is a bit more complicated, so the labor cost will be higher. You should be aware of this, as it's your design. Right. So how much more would it cost to craft such a bicycle? Lumen, who had only 100,000 mora left, was particularly concerned about the cost. Based on my experience, the cost of the main iron materials would be around 10,000 mora. As for the forging fee, I won't overcharge you. I'll base it on time 20,000 mora per day, and I'll get it done within a week. How does that sound? Master Zhang stated. Master Zhang usually had other tasks, such as forging and repairing weapons, so he couldn't spend an entire day just on this bicycle. Otherwise, it would only take 2 or 3 days to complete it. At 20,000 mora per day, a week would total 140,000 mora, plus 10,000 mora for materials, amounting to 150,000 mora in total. Considering the various intricate processes involved in forging from iron ore, this price was quite reasonable. Nolan and Lumen quickly calculated in their minds and nodded in agreement. A bicycle costing 150,000 mora seemed high, but this was due to the lack of mass production. Once a production line was established and output increased, the cost would easily be reduced by half. A bicycle with a final price of a few tens of thousands of mora had great potential for widespread use. This design could indeed fetch a good price. After finalizing the details of crafting the bicycle with Master Zhang of Hanfan's Ironmongers, they noticed it was already 6 p.m. They asked for the location of Wanman Restaurant and then left. They walked down the street, passing through to reach Wanman Restaurant. It was on the opposite side of the street from the Adventurers Guild and the blacksmith shop, very close by. Wanman Restaurant was a small eatery with outdoor seating, making it an open-air restaurant. Business was good, and the middle-aged chef inside seemed quite busy. Since Feiyun Commerce Guild's second young master had not arrived yet, Nolan and the others ordered a reasonably priced snack, Central Plains offal, from a nearby stall to eat while they waited. Before long, they saw Xingqiu approaching, accompanied by a young man with ice blue hair and dressed in white. Kong Gaiun, Nolan mentally identified him. He recognized this young man from the game. Kong Gaiun was a friend of Xingqiu, hailing from a famous exorcist family and possessing powerful magical skills. What made him remarkable was his rare pure yang constitution, causing any demons or ghosts to avoid him instinctively. Thus, he seldom encountered such creatures. The demons referred to here were not hilly churls or slimes but genuine supernatural entities like spirits and animals turned into spirits. "Oh? How come you're here so early?" Xingqiu asked, somewhat surprised. "Hehe, we had some business at the blacksmith shop and came over when it was about time," Paimon replied with a smile. "I see. Let me introduce you. This is my friend Kong Gaiun, an exorcist and practitioner of magical arts. I saw him on the street just back from outside and invited him to join us," Xingqiu said, nodding before introducing his friend to Nolan and the others. "An exorcist and practitioner of magical arts? That sounds impressive," Lumen said, sitting in her chair with her elbow on the table, resting her cheek on her pale palm, and looking curiously at the young man. "No, with my skills, I'm far from being an impressive practitioner," Kong Gaiun said humbly, quickly waving his hand as he sat down opposite Lumen and Nolan with Xingqiu. "By the way, do your magical arts include techniques to train and enhance spiritual power?" Nolan asked with great interest. Perhaps he could learn some magical skills from Kong Gaiun or inquire if his family had any methods to enhance mental strength. This would save the trouble of seeking out Adeptus. Chapter 219, Bound by Yelan, 2 in 1 chapter. After all, even if you find an Adeptus, there's no guarantee they will teach you their arts. You might even be put through some trials first. From the game's storyline, Nolan felt that the Adepti were somewhat aloof when dealing with ordinary people. They rarely appeared before humans unless they were particularly interested. You're interested in this kind of spellcraft? I've never heard my elders mention it, but even if it exists, it probably wouldn't be taught to outsiders, Kong Gaiun said, a bit embarrassed. Spellcraft? So these exorcists used spellcraft instead of magic? They were probably similar, just different names. As an outsider, Nolan couldn't grasp the nuances and sighed, saying, "I see. It seems that finding such methods would indeed require seeking out the Adepti." While everyone was chatting, Xingqiu had gone inside Wanman Restaurant to order some food. He returned just in time to hear Nolan mention the Adepti. Sitting back down, Xingqiu asked with interest, "Nolan, are you also looking for Adepti like my senior brother?" "Yes, I just know a mental/spiritual technique, but it requires a strong mind to be effective. So I'm looking for ways to train my spiritual power," Nolan explained briefly. "I see. It's a pity that I have new books to read recently. Otherwise, I would have loved to join in the search for Adepti and take down those treasure hoarders running rampant in the wilderness," Xingqiu said with a hint of regret. Reading books. For a book-loving Xingqiu, that was indeed a fitting reason, Nolan thought to himself. As they waited for their food, Xingqiu suddenly remembered something and asked, "Kong Gaiun, didn't you mention that you have an aunt who studied Adepti arts with an Adeptus? She might know methods to train spiritual power." "That's true. But ever since my aunt went to study with the Cloud Retainer at Mtaakang, we haven't seen her, and there's no way to contact her," Kong Gaiun said, his ice blue hair hanging down as he sighed. He was too young at the time and had never met her. "Oh, really? Could it be that the disciples of the Adepti aren't allowed to leave the mountain until they've mastered their training?" Lumen, now leaning back against her chair, seemed puzzled. "That shouldn't be the case," Kong Gaiun said, somewhat uncertain. Lumen might have a point. Adepti arts are the training methods of Adepti. Your aunt, being human, might lack the necessary talent, and thus hasn't yet mastered her skills to the point where she can leave the mountain, Xingqiu said with a look of sudden realization. After a pause, he smiled and suggested, "Kong Gaiun, since you usually exorcise spirits in the mountains, why not join Nolan and the others in their search? The Adepti might appear in respect for your aunt." "Of course," such an interesting endeavor is something I wouldn't want to miss. As for reading, I can do that on the road, he added with a chuckle. Hearing Xingqiu's suggestion, Nolan's eyes lit up. That's right, a deputy might not meet with him, but with Kong Gaiun, they might stand a better chance. And even if they didn't meet an adeptus, meeting Kong Gaiun's Aunt Shenhe would be just as good. He knew that Aunt wasn't untalented as Xingqiu suggested. On the contrary, she had talents that amazed even the adepti. She had learned nearly everything they taught. So, finding her and asking for her guidance might be easier than learning from an adeptus. Yes, that's a great idea. Paimon echoed in agreement. All right, since you all insist, I have no objections. If everyone wants to go, we can set off after the rite of dissension, Kong Gaiun said after a moment of thought. He realized there was no issue with this plan since exorcising spirits could be done anywhere. However, Kong Gaiun doubted that an adeptus would reveal themselves just because of his aunt. Here it comes, the food is here. Sorry to keep you waiting, Xingqiu and Kong Gaiun. At that moment, a young girl dressed simply, like the girl next door, came out carrying a tray full of dishes. A cute creature, resembling a yellow raccoon and walking upright, followed her with another tray. Xiangling, if you don't bring the food soon, our stomachs will shrink from hunger, Xingqiu said, pretending to clutch his belly dramatically. Hehe, good food takes time to cook. Don't worry about small delays like this, Xiangling laughed as she placed the delicious dishes from her tray onto the table. Qiaba, being shorter, barely managed to place his tray on the table. Wow, what an amazing little bear. It even helps with the work, unlike Paimon, who only thinks about food, Lumen said, teasing her companion while looking at Qiaba. Hey, that's not true. I'm also seriously doing my job as a guide. Paimon retorted, hands on her hips in indignation. This is Qiaba, my good partner. And you must be the new friends Xingqiu and Kong Gaiun mentioned. I'm Xiangling, nice to meet you all, Xiangling said. Being longtime friends with Xingqiu and Kong Gaiun, she wanted to get to know their new friends as well. Yes, nice to meet you, Xiangling. This guy here is Nolan, the one next to him is Lumen, and I'm Paimon. Nice to meet you. Paimon said with a smile, introducing her friends. All right, I need to get back to work. Please come by Wanman restaurant often. Xiangling said as she hurried back with Qiaba. It was dinner time, and she was too busy to chat. Of course, Nolan and the others nodded in agreement. They continued discussing their plan to search for Kong Gaiun's aunt after the rite of dissension. After enjoying the delicious meal prepared by Xiangling, the group concluded the dinner hosted by Xingqiu. Under the night sky, the stars were arranged like a river. Even in the bustling city of Liyue Harbor, the streets and squares became less crowded as it approached 11 at night. The taverns were the only exceptions. After dinner, Nolan, Lumen, and Paimon strolled around Liyue Harbor to get familiar with the new city. However, Liyue Harbor was too large to explore entirely, so they only covered a small nearby area, like the docks and the shipyard. Finally, at this late hour with fewer people around, they returned to the teleport waypoint by the tree in the square. Great, no one's looking this way. Let's activate it now, Paimon said, feeling exhausted and eager to rest. Lumen brushed the golden strands of hair from her face and tucked them behind her ear, then reached out her fair hand towards the glowing red teleport waypoint. As she pressed her palm against it, she felt its cool surface. In no time, the red light of the teleport waypoint faded, and it began to rise from its base, eventually hovering slightly while emitting a blue light completely different from its inactive state. All right, grab my hand, Lumen said, holding the waypoint with her left hand while extending her right hand to Nolan and Paimon. Paimon placed her small hand on Lumen's arm, while Nolan grasped her soft fingers as if holding hands. This guy. Lumen naturally noticed Nolan's more intimate grip, and a faint blush appeared on her fair face, though it was hardly visible in the night. I hope he hasn't figured out what happened that night, she thought, feeling a mix of embarrassment and annoyance as she turned her head to initiate the teleport. Still, she didn't pull her hand away. Lumen has developed good feelings towards you, obtained 200 affection points. Current affection level, LV.8, 5/800. Seeing the affection notification pop up on his character panel, Nolan was momentarily taken aback. Then he smiled and tightened his hold on her hand a bit more. Just as they were about to teleport, a female voice suddenly interrupted them. Oh my, running into suspicious characters while out for a night stroll. Since you're making me work overtime, I can't let you leave so easily. Yelan had been watching these sneaky individuals for a while. Seeing the girl activate the strange device only made them seem more suspicious, so she decided to intervene. Yelan concealed herself in the shadows, swiftly approaching them without them noticing. Thin, water blue threads emerged from the void, binding the group together before they could react. Hey! Who are you? Why are you grabbing us? Paimon shouted angrily, unable to move. Standing before Nolan and the others was a short-haired woman dressed in a sleeveless, shoulder-bearing top with a white, sleeved cape draped over her shoulders. Her neckline revealed a glimpse of her fair skin. Yelan. Nolan instantly recognized her as the renowned Queen Yelan, well known among players. But he never expected their first encounter to involve being captured as suspicious characters. This was bad. Moreover, her skills were impressive. Nolan hadn't noticed her approach at all. Still, they weren't actually suspicious. As long as they explained, everything should be fine. Stay still and come with me for questioning, Yelan ordered. Yelan's pale lips curled into a smile as she tightened the lifeline threads with a slight tug of her fingers. An investigation. Lumen didn't know who this woman was, but she wasn't about to sit still and do nothing. Since her hands were bound, she lifted her foot to touch the teleport waypoint. Hey, wait! Nolan, guessing what she intended, quickly tried to stop her. If they teleport away without explaining, they might be considered fugitives next time they returned. But it was too late. As Lumen touched the waypoint, they were immediately teleported. The stars seemed to reverse their course. They plunged into darkness before their vision quickly lit up again, accompanied by the gurgling sound of flowing water. It was the sound of the fountain in Mondstadt's plaza. They were back. Phew, we're back. But these ropes are still here. Find a way to untie them quickly, or I'll be squashed. Paimon, recognizing the familiar city of Mondstadt, breathed a sigh of relief. That woman, who knows who she is, but she just tried to arrest us for no reason, said Lumen, bound by the blue threads, her white dress revealing her bare back as she pressed against Nolan. She was about to use an mo to cut the threads when a hand nearby managed to grab her right hand. Ahem, don't act rashly. Lumen and Paimon couldn't see Nolan, but he hurriedly stopped Lumen. He looked at Yelan, who, to his surprise, had been teleported along with them. She was now raising her eyebrows curiously as she observed their surroundings. He cleared his throat and spoke. What is it? Lumen asked, puzzled, turning her head. The golden strands by her ear brushed against Nolan's face. She then noticed the woman still holding the threads. She fell silent. So, this is Mondstadt? I see. That device is for teleportation, and because I was connected to you via the lifeline, I was brought along, Yelan said as she stepped closer, her long legs wrapped in tight-fitting high-heeled boots. She smiled and added, Are you spies from Mondstadt? Hey! This is ridiculous. We were just using the teleport waypoint, we're not spies. And if we're suspicious, so are you, roaming around at night, Paimon retorted, unable to hide her frustration. Hehe, it seems I haven't introduced myself. I work for the Ministry of Civil Affairs in Liyue. My name is Yelan. Seeing you sneaking around at night, I thought it was reasonable to capture you, Yelan said, leaning in and staring at Paimon. Well, this is actually a misunderstanding, Nolan began, catching the faint fragrance emanating from Yelan. Just then, he noticed a figure on the rooftop of a nearby building. Miss Yelan from the Ministry of Civil Affairs in Liyue, could you please release our 2 honorary knights and their white companion? A nun stood on the rooftop, arms crossed, speaking in a bored tone. Paimon is not some white companion. Paimon protested, clearly missing the point. Oh? And who are you? Yelan asked, looking up with some confusion. Humph, I'm Rosaria of the Church of Favonius, the nun replied, leaping down from the rooftop. Finally, Nolan and the others got a clear look at her. Chapter 220, starting, Rite of Dissension, 2 in 1 chapter. On the dark red hair rested a crown of thorns, and a black headscarf draped over the back, revealing a hollowed-out area. Her skin was surprisingly pale, and her chest was wrapped in a high-collared halter neck top. Her legs were clad in black fishnet stockings, and she wore short boots of the same color. Overall, the outfit still maintained a nun-like style. You said these 2 are honorary knights of the Knights of Favonius. Yelan remarked with slight surprise. She had heard that Mondstadt had been attacked by the Storm Terror not long ago, and that 2 honorary knights had played a significant role in defending the city. She hadn't expected them to be the ones she had captured. That's right. If the Ministry of Civil Affairs in Liyue wrongly detains them, the Knights of Favonius won't stand idly by, Rosaria said calmly, still with her arms crossed. Hehe, so you're indeed not suspicious individuals, Yelan said, nodding as she looked at Nolan and the others. Of course. We're kind and righteous people, not villains at all. Paimon said with some annoyance. Right, it's all a misunderstanding. Actually, the situation is... Nolan took the opportunity to explain that they were merely using the teleport waypoint to return to Mondstadt. All right, it seems I've misunderstood you, Yelan admitted, her interrogation experience telling her they weren't lying. But it's clear that these devices do serve a purpose. So, someone really can activate them. She retracted the lifeline threads that had bound them, looking at them with a hint of curiosity. It's just a personal special ability, Lumen replied, shaking her slightly sore hands, not wanting to go into too much detail with this woman who had just restrained them. I see. Yelan smiled without prying further. By the way, your ability seems quite convenient. Would you be interested in becoming my mission assistant? Mission assistant? More like a spy assistant, Nolan thought to himself, considering Yelan's recruitment attempt. After all, she wasn't just a regular employee of the Ministry of Civil Affairs, it was merely one of her identities. Yelan's true identity was a special intelligence officer directly under Ningguang, the Tian Chuan. She's accustomed to carrying out missions in foreign lands and is even known to have ventured into the dangerous abyss. Given this, it made sense that Yelan would be interested in Lumen's teleportation ability. Being able to quickly escape dangerous situations and return to Liyue after acquiring necessary information would be invaluable for intelligence work. Though Yelan was powerful, she wasn't proficient in magic and thus lacked the ability for long-distance teleportation. I'll think about it, Lumen replied, lowering her head in thought. She initially intended to refuse, but considering her current financial situation, working with an official like Yelan might provide a good source of mora. It's possible, but I would like to work in a manner similar to the Adventurers Guild where you issue commissions and I accept them. I have my own matters to attend to as well, Lumen finally agreed with a nod. Hehe, that works too. I'll find you when I need you, Yelan said with a gentle smile on her pale face. All right, it's getting late. Since I'm here in Mondstadt, I might as well head to the famous Angel's Share Tavern for a drink. She clasped her hands together, lifting her ample chest slightly, and glanced at the nun beside her. With a slight parting of her red lips, she asked, Is that all right, Miss Rosaria? As someone in intelligence work, Yelan could easily tell that Rosaria's job wasn't so different from hers. Of course, it's fine. I'm off duty anyway, Rosaria replied, giving Yelan a sidelong glance before heading in the direction of Angel's Share. Hehe, so cautious, Yelan remarked with a soft chuckle, waving goodbye to Nolan and the others before following Rosaria. For a moment, the empty night streets were left with only Nolan, Lumen, and Paimon. Phew, she's finally gone. That dangerous woman, I really don't want to see her again. Paimon vented her frustration, stomping her feet in the air as she recalled being tied up. But remembering how powerless she was against Yelan, she could only droop her shoulders helplessly. All right, let's head back, Lumen said, turning towards the direction of Valberry Street. Meeting someone with a seemingly high position in the Liyue government wasn't a total loss for the night. Paimon and Nolan walked alongside her. As they walked, Nolan thought that since the two had developed a good rapport, he should take the initiative. He reached out to hold Lumen's hand. Ahem. A slight blush appeared on Lumen's fair skin. She awkwardly coughed, folded her arms, and pushed Nolan's hand away, not giving him the chance. What's wrong? Paimon asked, puzzled, looking at Lumen. Nothing. Morning. Nolan yawned as he came downstairs. Last night, he noticed that little Amy wasn't home, likely having returned to her own place. He felt a bit disappointed, as he had hoped to spend more time bonding with her. Yo, good morning. A familiar yet unfamiliar voice called out from the living room, causing Nolan to open his sleepy eyes wide. As expected, there she was. A mature-looking lady with short neck-length hair, a fair face, and an elegant demeanor sat on the light blue sofa. Yelan, what are you doing here? Nolan asked in surprise. Well, after drinking with Miss Rosaria last night, I realized I had nowhere to go. To return, I'd need Lumen's teleportation ability, so I stayed here overnight. You don't mind, do you? Yelan crossed her black, tight-fitting high-heeled boots, speaking in a lazy tone. For her, finding Nolan and the others' residence was a simple task. Of course not, Nolan replied. If a stranger had silently infiltrated his home and stayed the night, it would have been terrifying. But with Yelan, it wasn't as alarming since she had no ulterior motives towards him. Great, thank you. Also, I'm a bit hungry. Could you prepare something to eat? Yelan asked with a cheeky smile. Nolan was silent for a moment, thinking, this is supposed to be my house, but why does it feel like you're the owner here? All right, it's just adding an extra set of dishes, Nolan sighed, not bothering to complain. Hehe, what a considerate man, Yelan said with a soft smile, a look of appreciation in her eyes. Yelan had developed good feelings towards you, obtained 220 affection points. Current affection level, LV.2, 120/200, . Nolan glanced at the notification on the character panel, a bit surprised. That was a good amount of affection gained, even without the honorary knight title bonus. Perhaps she likes considerate men who can help her with things. It makes sense, given that she seems to be a strong, capable woman. After breakfast, they teleport back to Liyue Harbor. Their sudden appearance caught the attention of passers-by, who glanced curiously at them, but they quickly moved on without giving anyone a chance to ask questions. This made Nolan realize the importance of improving their stealth abilities. With a few days left before the Rite of Dissension, they decided to take on some commissions from the Adventurers Guild, especially those involving clearing out monsters. It was a good way to earn mora and gain experience. Lumen agreed with this plan. After Yelan left, they immediately went to the Adventurers Guild and accepted a task to clear out a ruin hunter at the Gailai Plains ruins. Based on the investigator's description on the commission slip, Nolan estimated the ruin hunter to be around level 40, not too strong, so they should be able to handle it easily. They took on several other nearby commissions with similar difficulty and set off. The following days followed the same routine, accept commissions in the morning, go out to complete them, return at night to submit their completed tasks, and then teleport back to rest. Their rapid completion of commissions quickly made Nolan, Lumen, and their fairy companion quite famous at the Liyue Adventurers Guild. They were even given a strange nickname, the Black, White, and Gold Trio. Even Paimon was baffled by the name, wondering how anyone could come up with something so cheesy she couldn't even think of anything that bad. On the day of the Rite of Dissension, as they made their way to the event location at Yujing Terrace, Nolan took a moment to reflect on their accomplishments over the past few days. They had completed 16 dangerous commissions involving monster extermination, earning around 3.2 million mora. The materials collected from the monsters were sold to the Adventurers Guild for about 400,000 mora, bringing their total earnings to 3.6 million mora. Splitting it evenly, each got 1.8 million mora. This temporarily resolved their financial issues, but with money now in hand, it was time to enhance their abilities. Upgrading weapons and artifacts would require a significant amount of mora. However, it still wasn't enough. According to the Adventurers Guild statistics, upgrading a 4-star artifact to its maximum potential would cost around 4 million mora for enhancement materials alone. Weapons were even more expensive, with various materials and mystic enhancement ore costing at least 5 times as much mora as the same level artifact enhancements. Sigh. It's rare to have a set of 4-star artifacts and a 4-star Moonlight Greatsword, but it's a bit disappointing not being able to level them up to their full potential and unleash their true power. In a couple of days, Old Zhang should have a prototype of the bicycle ready. Once it's tested and proven functional, I'll take it to see Tianquan Ningguang. However, it's somewhat difficult for ordinary people to meet her, and I vaguely recall that she's the one presiding over this year's Rite of Dissension. I wonder if there will be a chance to speak with Ningguang later. Nolan thought, reminiscing as he raised his head. So lively, is everyone here to watch the Rite of Dissension? Paimon hovered above Lumen's head, looking around at the people on the streets. I wonder what Lord Rex Lapis will say this year. You know, the 17 decrees he issued 2 years ago caused quite a stir in the market, said a middle-aged man wearing a top hat, who looked like a businessman, as he walked past Nolan with his business partner. Hehe, the Kixing's Rite of Dissension is arguably the most important day for merchants. As the largest economy on the continent of Teyvat, any policy change in Liyue can affect the entire continent's market. Yes, any successful merchant immediately starts analyzing what business opportunities might arise from the decrees, just like Tianquan herself. It's said that she rose from humble beginnings to become one of the Kixing, wielding immense power. To elevate the status of a merchant to such a height is an honor for all of us. As they got closer to Yujing Terrace, where the rite of dissension was being held, more people gathered, and their conversations inevitably reached Nolan's ears. So ordinary people can also reach the level of the Liyue Kixing? Lumen, why don't you try to become one? Then we'd be the richest people in the world. Paimon said excitedly. That's not how it works. Even if I became one of the Liyue Kixing, it wouldn't mean I could freely control Mora. Besides, I'm not from Liyue. They probably wouldn't choose a foreigner as one of their rulers, Lumen replied, looking at Paimon as if she were a fool. Nolan chuckled. With some time left before reaching Yujing Terrace, he glanced at the character panel that only he could see. Adventure EXP, 36,753. Over the past few days, aside from earning Mora from commissions, he had also gained a lot of Adventure EXP, mostly from clearing out monsters. In addition to the monsters that needed to be cleared as part of their commissions, they also encountered some along the way. Occasionally, while exploring the wilderness, they stumbled upon a treasure chest or two. One particularly exquisite chest unexpectedly contained 3 primo gems. After absorbing them, the total Adventure EXP accumulated reached over 30,000. He considered using these EXP to upgrade the concealment form skill, but realized it wasn't quite enough to max it out. So, he decided to use them to increase his character level instead. Adventure EXP, 34,800. LV.40, 0/4000, LV.48, 0/4800. He gained 8 levels in one go, feeling a powerful warm current surge through his body. It spread like a gentle breeze, reaching every cell. He felt stronger, lighter on his feet, and more invigorated both physically and mentally. His mind was clearer than ever, and even his psychic power had increased significantly. If he could only bend an iron spoon with his spiritual threads before, he could now bend 2. The range had extended to about 5 meters, making it more effective for disrupting enemies. After completing the upgrades, Nolan exhaled slightly. He glanced at the character panel again, noting that he had less than 2,000 Adventure EXP left. They were spent quickly. When he had enough Mora, he planned to put up a commission at the Adventurers Guild for collecting primo gems, offering a price 2 or 3 times higher than the market rate, hoping someone would be willing to sell. As Nolan dreamed about a bright future, the surrounding pedestrians gradually slowed to a stop. They had arrived at Yujing Terrace. Chapter 221, Geo Archon's Assassination. Liyue Harbor, Yujing Terrace. The mighty Millilith soldiers were maintaining order at the venue for the Rite of Dissension, carefully guiding the crowd to stand dispersed around the area to avoid congestion. At the spacious center of Yujing Terrace, a large incense burner-like object was placed. In front of it, a stone table displayed an array of exquisite food offerings dedicated to the Geo Archon. It seemed the time for the inviting of the Adepti ceremony hadn't arrived yet, as one of the Kixing who was to host the ceremony had not appeared. By the time Nolan and his companions arrived, Yujing Terrace was already surrounded by multiple layers of onlookers. Lumen stood on her tiptoes, looking around, but could only see the heads of the people in front of her. Wow, so many people! Let's move up a bit, we can't see anything from here, Paimon suggested, effortlessly flying into the air. Seeing this, Lumen also tried to push forward. However, a stranger dressed in a dark blue robe blocked her way, glaring down at her. Move aside. If you can't see, neither can I. If you have the ability, fly over like that little sprite. Fine, fine. No need to be so rude. Lumen retorted, placing her hands on her hips and glaring back at him. Humph, I'm not going to argue with a little girl, the man scoffed, folding his arms and turning away. Humph. Lumen huffed, her fair face showing her displeasure at the rude man. Nolan, trying to lighten the mood, suggested, no need to get upset. If you can't see, I can create an updraft using Anmo. How about I blow you over there? Lumen's amber eyes brightened at the idea. Yes, please, she nodded, her golden hair swaying slightly. All right, just a moment, Nolan said. Given his current strength, creating a small wind field was manageable. He stepped back to a clear area and began gathering Anmo elements in his hands, like swallows returning to their nests. He then placed the miniature wind field on the ground, continuously infusing it with Enmo until it expanded to about a meter in width and height. Once the wind field was ready, Nolan stopped infusing it with Enmo and gave Lumen a signal with his eyes. She nodded in understanding, opened her wind glider with a whoosh, and lightly leaped into the wind field. She easily soared 2 or 3 meters into the air, like a kite catching the wind. Their actions, however, attracted the attention of a Millelith soldier maintaining order nearby. "Hey! You two! No using elemental powers at the Yujing Terrace, it's dangerous. Stop immediately!" The soldier shouted from the entrance. Startled by the sudden shout, Nolan momentarily lost concentration, cutting off the flow of Enmo to the wind field. The wind field dissipated, causing Lumen to lose control of her wind glider and fall. "Ah!" Lumen exclaimed in surprise. Just as she thought she was about to hit the ground, Nolan quickly reached out and caught her. A substantial weight settled in Nolan's arms, with the soft, warm feeling of the girl's body noticeable both where his left hand held her shoulder and where her calves rested on his right hand. "You! There are so many people watching, put me down," Lumen said, a slight blush appearing on her fair face. She glanced at Nolan, who seemed reluctant to let go, and instinctively pinched his side. Sorry." Feeling the gentle pressure on his abdomen, Nolan quickly set her down. "Humph," Lumen huffed, standing upright and giving him a glare before walking away. She wanted to see if she could find a way to the front of the venue, preventing Nolan from getting any more funny ideas. "Lumen had developed good feelings towards you, obtained 160 affection points. Current affection level, LV.8, 165/800. Seeing the notification on the character panel, Nolan realized Lumen wasn't truly angry. He turned to the Millelith soldier and apologized before following Lumen to see if they could get closer to the front. The crowd was indeed dense, making it hard to see ahead. "Hey, why are you still out here?" Lady Ningguang, the Tianquan of the Kixing, who's hosting this year's Rite of Dissension, has already appeared. Paimon exclaimed, flying back to them after having watched for a while. The ceremony was about to start, and she hadn't seen Nolan and Lumen yet. "There are too many people, it's hard to get to the front. Paimon, how about you grab us both and fly us up to see?" Lumen suggested, eyeing Paimon's small hands. "That's impossible. There's no way that would work." Paimon retorted, annoyed. How could Lumen even suggest such a silly idea? There was no way she had the strength to lift 2 full-grown people. "All right, Paimon, just find a spot with a bigger gap, and I'll find a way to squeeze through," Nolan suggested with a smile. "Hehe, that's more like it." Paimon agreed, relieved she wouldn't have to use brute force. She nodded and flew higher, scanning the area before spotting a suitable spot. "I found it. Follow me." Paimon led them to the left, where they found a slight gap near a pillar that separated the crowd a bit. Nolan, using his increased mental power, employed his spiritual threads, now able to extend up to 5 meters. He gently, almost imperceptibly, nudged the crowd aside, creating enough space for them to slip through. Quickly but discreetly, he and Lumen made their way to the front, gaining a perfect view of the venue where the Rite of Dissension was about to begin. Standing by the incense burner and stone table was a tall, dignified woman dressed in a luxurious cheongsam. The garment featured a base of white adorned with gold accents and black highlights, blending into a refined 3-color design. Her aura commanded respect and attention. Her platinum blonde hair, smooth and flowing, was elegantly gathered with a dark wooden hairpin. The long ends of her hair split from the middle of her back, cascading along the graceful curves of her body and the hem of her cheongsam, reaching down to her pale calves. Ningguang raised her right hand, clad in a black sleeve, shielding her forehead. Her crimson eyes, looking through golden-tipped fingers, glanced up at the dazzling sun, confirming that it was now at its zenith, signaling noon. She then lowered her hands, gently clasping them in front of her lower abdomen, covered by the cheongsam. In a voice that blended authority with gentleness, she simply announced, "The auspicious hour has arrived." With those words, 2 young women, seemingly there to assist, bowed slightly and stepped back. A faint golden glow of geo-energy began to emanate from Ningguang. Several palm-sized, ember-colored gemstones appeared effortlessly around her and started orbiting her. With a wave of her left hand, these gems traced trails of geo-energy as they flew towards the large incense burner on the stone table. After circling the burner a few times, Ningguang made a hand gesture, causing the gems to suddenly crash into the burner. Within seconds, the burner shook violently. A massive golden pillar of light shot up into the sky, causing the weather to change abruptly. The sky darkened, swirling as if a vortex had formed. Does Archon always make such a grand entrance? Paimon, like everyone else, looked up at the sky in curiosity. Something seems off. It wasn't this dark when Archon appeared 2 years ago, remarked a young man beside Nolan, speaking softly. Oh? Could there be some sort of incident? Nolan casually responded. Ningguang, appearing slightly puzzled, looked up along the golden pillar of light toward the sky. Just as she was about to investigate further, a massive shadow plummeted from the clouds at great speed. Bang! The incense burner and the stone table were shattered instantly. As the dust settled, everyone saw a creature that appeared to be a mix of a Kylan and a dragon lying in the ruins. What's going on? It looks like Archon fell from the sky. Hearing the murmurs around them, Lumen and Paimon widened their eyes, staring in shock at the creature lying in the rubble. This was not how they expected to encounter Rex Lapis. Ningguang stepped forward in her black high heels, kneeling slightly without letting her white knees touch the ground. She carefully observed the semi-Kylan, semi-dragon form of Rex Lapis with a serious expression. After a moment, she arrived at a conclusion that even she found hard to believe. Archon has been assassinated. Seal off the area. Ningguang stood up and quickly instructed the many Millilith soldiers to maintain order. For Rex Lapis to have met his end now, right during the rite of dissension at noon, was too coincidental. The culprit behind this assassination was likely among the crowd present. Wait, what's happening now? Paimon, seeing the sudden commotion, was nearly overwhelmed. Tianchuan Ningguang had just declared that Archon has been assassinated. What do we do? They're going to start questioning suspicious-looking people. Paimon expressed her concern, worried that they might be suspected, given their close proximity to the scene. We don't know if this god is the one who took my brother. Just in case, we need to leave here quickly before they catch us, Lumen said, feeling a bit anxious as she glanced toward the round moon gate by the Jade Chamber's wall. She was about to take a step towards escaping when she felt a tug on her hand, preventing her from moving. Turning around, she saw that Nolan was holding her hand, prompting her to ask, confused, "What are you doing? If we don't run now, we'll get caught." Understanding the context of this scene, Nolan quickly pulled Lumen closer, wrapping an arm around her waist, making them look like a couple. This kept her from appearing as if she was trying to escape, which would raise suspicion. "Hey, what are you doing at a time like this?" Lumen protested, pushing against Nolan's chest with both hands. Normally, she could overlook his affectionate gestures, but given the crisis, she was genuinely upset. "If you run now, it'll only make you look guilty, like you're the culprit," Nolan explained. Liyue Harbor is huge, and there are so many Millilith soldiers and the powerful Liyue Kixing. Where could you possibly go? Besides, we're not the culprits. As long as we answer their questions like everyone else, we'll be fine. After all, we're honorary knights of the Knights of Favonius. Without evidence, they can't detain us without causing diplomatic issues. Nolan couldn't exactly explain that he knew Rex Lapis had faked his death. He simply wanted to experience a life of leisure, bringing some subtle changes and shocks to Liyue. Thus, he held Lumen tightly, not letting her go. It wouldn't be good to end up wanted by the Millilith, especially since it was avoidable. "Right, Lumen, Paimon think this guy might have a point," Paimon chimed in, pondering for a moment. Although Lumen's concerns were valid, Nolan's argument also seemed reasonable. They weren't the culprits, and running would only make them look suspicious. If we were really wanted by Liyue, the most prosperous nation on the continent of Teyvat, it wouldn't matter where we ran, it would only hinder your journey to find your brother. Paimon, despite her usual obsession with food, wasn't dumb. In times of crisis, she could assess the situation and make sound judgments. Hearing Paimon's words, Lumen's hands, which had been pushing against Nolan's chest, relaxed. She wasn't unintelligent, she had just panicked. Now, calming down, she realized that they were right, she'd been a bit hasty. "All right, I get it. Now let go of me," Lumen said, her fair cheeks blushing slightly from embarrassment. Understanding the situation, she still felt a bit awkward, so she stomped on Nolan's foot to vent her frustration. Lumen had developed good feelings towards you, obtained 260 affection points. Current affection level, LV.8, 425/800, *. Seeing Lumen's unexpectedly cute, Sundara behavior, Nolan sensibly released her, though he took the opportunity to hold her hand instead. Lumen only made a token effort to pull away. When it didn't work, she pretended to be angry, turning her face away without making any further moves. Hey? You too! Paimon exclaimed, suddenly realizing something as she looked at their clasped hands. She then glared at Nolan, saying, "So, you're a two-timer. Aren't you already in a relationship with Fiskal? And now you're after Lumen." I don't think she'll mind," Nolan replied, awkwardly rubbing his cheek and avoiding Paimon's gaze. This was the benefit of high affection level. Neither Fiskal nor Lumen seemed to mind that he had multiple romantic interests. Just then, the Millelith soldiers noticed the unusual trio of Nolan, Lumen, and Paimon and approached them for questioning. After all, Paimon, an unusual, fairy-like creature, stood out and drew attention. Chapter 222, Child. Liyue Harbor, Yujing Terrace. After the assassination of Rex Lapis, Lady Ningguang of the Tianquan ordered the Millelith to seal off the area and thoroughly investigate everyone present, starting with those who appeared suspicious. Soon enough, the Millelith approached Nolan and his group. "Who are you, and where are you from?" The Millelith captain, sensing the group's strength and wary of any suspicious individuals trying to escape, surrounded them with a team and asked in a stern tone. Paimon, usually talkative, was frightened by the intimidating presence of the soldiers and hid behind Lumen, afraid of saying the wrong thing. Lumen glanced at Nolan, signaling for him to handle the situation. Nolan gently squeezed her soft hand and nodded slightly, indicating it was fine. He then calmly addressed the Millelith captain, "We are from Mondstadt, honorary knights of the Knights of Favonius. We're currently traveling through the 7 nations and happened to hear that Liyue Harbor's annual Rite of Dissension was about to begin, so we came to witness the grandeur of Archon. But who would have thought something like this would happen? Archon is immensely powerful, far beyond what people like us could manage, and we have no reason to do such a thing." He laid out their situation clearly, providing all the necessary information, leaving little room for suspicion. The honorary knights of Mondstadt. The Millelith captain looked surprised. News of the major events in neighboring Mondstadt had reached Liyue, and he was aware of the feats of the 2 honorary knights. One of them was even said to be from Liyue, though he had no idea what he was doing in the neighboring nation. Regardless, such minor details were beyond their concern. Seeing how young the honorary knights were was unexpected. "Yes, I believe verifying our identities shouldn't be difficult for the Millelith," Nolan said seriously, implying they weren't joking about such easily disproved identities. Wait here for a moment. I'll notify Lady Ningguang. She should be able to confirm whether your identities are genuine," the captain replied, nodding. He then instructed the nearby soldiers armed with long spears to keep an eye on them while he went to inform Ningguang. As the Tianquan star, Lady Ningguang was keenly aware of everything happening in the world. She would likely have information on the 2 honorary knights who had assisted the Knights of Favonius in repelling the storm terror, perhaps even having seen their photos. To be safe, it was best to have Lady Ningguang come and verify their identities personally. It wasn't long before the Millelith captain returned, though without Lady Ningguang. He nodded to the soldiers, indicating everything was fine, then addressed Nolan and the others. "Lady Ningguang is currently investigating the cause of Archon's death and cannot come at the moment. However, she mentioned that she noticed you at the beginning of the ceremony, and your identities are confirmed to be legitimate." "Phew, that's a relief. So we can leave now, right?" Paimon sighed in relief upon hearing they were cleared and asked eagerly. "No, not yet," the Millelith captain shook his head. "While you're no longer suspects, the Yujing Terrace is still sealed off. No one can leave until the investigation is complete. You can rest over there for now." With that, the Millelith captain and the soldiers moved on to question the next suspicious individuals. "How can this be? We've already proven we're not the culprits," Paimon said, disheartened, her shoulders slumping. "Given such a major incident, it's understandable. At least we're not being suspected as the culprits, which is already a relief." Nolan also let out a small sigh of relief. He turned to Lumen and continued, "See? I told you we didn't need to run away." Lumen didn't respond. She withdrew her left hand, crossed her arms, and showed a slightly resigned expression on her fair face. "Feeling pretty smug, aren't you?" Around 3 p.m., thanks to the efforts of the Millelith, everyone at the scene was quickly questioned, and their identities confirmed. Unfortunately, the real culprit wasn't found. The area was unsealed, and Lady Ningguang of the Tianquan promised to swiftly investigate the truth behind Rex Lapis's death. Many locals and foreigners left the scene with various speculations. It's easy to imagine how the news of Rex Lapis's death would cause a massive stir across the entire continent of Teyvat. Nolan, Lumen, and Paimon also left with the crowd. Nolan had considered using the opportunity to talk to Ningguang about the bicycle idea, but then he thought it would be rude to discuss business right after such a tragic event. Besides, since Master Zhang hadn't finished the sample yet, it would be best to present a finished product to make a strong impression. "Hey there, everyone!" As they walked along the stone-paved road away from the Yujing Terrace, a young man's voice called out to them as they rounded a corner. They looked towards the source of the voice and saw a handsome man with orange hair and grey clothes, leaning against a wall. "What's up? Do you need something, Mr. Foreigner?" Paimon asked, puzzled, while touching her crown. "Haha, in this country, aren't you a foreigner too? It's funny to see a foreigner calling another foreigner a foreigner," the handsome man with orange hair and grey clothes chuckled. "The Liyue Harbinger, child Tartaglia." It seemed inevitable that he would show up, as he had been watching them for some time. Nolan thought to himself that this could be troublesome. "Hey, that doesn't matter. If you've got something to say, spit it out. If not, we're leaving," Paimon said angrily, using her air stomp move in frustration at his amusement. All right, my apologies. You can call me child, just like you refer to La Signora. I'm also one of the Liyue Harbingers." Child smiled with a glint in his eyes. "What?" Lumen and Paimon were startled by Child's candid introduction and eyed him warily. If it weren't forbidden to fight in Liyue Harbor, Lumen would have already drawn her sword. No need to be so tense. I'm not here to cause trouble. Though I would love to spar with you," Tartaglia said, spreading his hands to show he meant no harm. "Even so, we have nothing to say to you or the Liyue." Nolan's eyes gradually took on a golden hue. Level 75. As expected of a Liyue Harbinger, even the lowest ranked one possessed strength at the 70+ level. Nolan estimated that he could barely defeat a level 60 Abyss Mage with his current strength. But facing someone above level 70 would still be challenging. After all, as one climbs higher, each level difference becomes like a chasm. However, with Lumen by his side, they wouldn't be easily overpowered, unless Child used his foul legacy transformation. Thus, Nolan spoke with a bit more confidence. "Oh, it seems your eyes can see right through me," Tartaglia chuckled and offered a friendly reminder, "but if you judge my combat ability based solely on my level, you'll be in for a surprise." Nolan didn't respond, he was well aware of this. After all, even at level 48, he could challenge stronger foes thanks to his specialized skills. Moreover, Child had the mastery of all weapons talent, making him exceptionally skilled in combat and capable of fighting opponents of higher levels. Seeing their continued wariness, Tartaglia decided to cut to the chase. "Do you really think Archon was assassinated? He was a god of war. Who could easily assassinate him, unless..." He trailed off, leaving the implication hanging. It seemed he wanted Nolan and the others to fill in the blanks themselves. "Are you suggesting it was the Liyue Kixing?" Lumen's amber eyes narrowed, as if she'd stumbled upon a shocking possibility. Tartaglia's lips curved slightly. "Of course, that's just a guess. But even if that's the case, it has nothing to do with us. It's their internal affair, we have no business interfering. Or do you have some ulterior motive?" Nolan laughed lightly, speaking frankly. "Haha, it seems you've misunderstood me. I've only heard a bit about your exploits in Mondstadt and noticed you at the Rite of Dissension earlier. It was clear you were there with a purpose." Tartaglia crossed his arms, a confident tone in his voice. "If I'm not mistaken, you were hoping to meet Archon for something." Lumen frowned slightly. "And if we were? I just wanted to offer you a suggestion," Tartaglia said, spreading his hands as if to show he had no ulterior motive. "With Archon gone, you can't ask him anything. But the Adepti, who have known him for ages, might still provide answers. If you're willing to inform them of Archon's assassination, they might not hesitate to answer your questions. So that's his plan, using them to sow discord between the Adepti and the Kixing, creating chaos he can exploit to steal the Gnosis from Rex Lapis's remains." Nolan, familiar with the game's plot, easily saw through Child's intentions. It was something Child couldn't have anticipated. Lumen hesitated. The sudden death of Rex Lapis had thwarted her plans to ask him about the god who kidnapped her brother. If there was still a chance, she certainly didn't want to miss it. They had planned to find the Adepti, but locating them was no simple task. They were only hoping to find one of their disciples, who happened to be Kong Gyun's aunt. If you're worried about not finding the Adepti, I can lend you something, Child said, noticing Lumen's interest. Something? Is it a token of some sort? Paimon asked curiously. Something like that, Child nodded. So, what do we need to give you in return for borrowing this token? Nolan smiled and asked. He guessed Child was referring to the all-purpose Adepti Seeker. It's certainly useful, with it, they could almost guarantee a meeting with the Adepti. Running an errand for Child in exchange seemed reasonable. After all, even if they didn't do it, Child would find someone else to carry out his plan. Child might think he was orchestrating everything, but Rex Lapis himself was secretly watching. He needed Child to bring the conflict between the Adepti and the Kixing to the forefront. This was part of the plan to lessen the Adepti's interference in Liyue's affairs and usher in an era of human governance, which was the real reason behind Rex Lapis's fake death and retreat. Haha, no payment necessary. Just return it when you're done, Child said with a smile. He then pulled out a yellow talisman with black characters from his vision and handed it to Nolan. It's called the All-Purpose Adepti Seeker. Holding it will allow the Adepti to sense your presence, and they'll likely come to meet you. After handing over the item, Child said he had other matters to attend to and told them they could find him at the Northland Bank if needed, then left. He could sense that they were already suspicious of him. However, he had spoken the truth and provided a valuable item, he doubted they would pass up the opportunity. What should we do? Should we tell the Adepti about Geo Archon's death? I feel like this Liyue Harbinger is up to something. Paimon asked, looking at Nolan, who was holding the talisman. Lumen was inclined to go, as finding out who kidnapped her brother was her priority, and Rex Lapis's death left the Adepti as the only possible source of information. We were planning to find the Adepti anyway. Since he's so kindly lending us something, we might as well use it, Nolan said with a smile after thinking for a moment. They had arranged with Xingqiu and Kong Gyun to seek out the Adepti 3 days after the Rite of Dissension, so there was no rush. In the meantime, Nolan and Lumen took on some commissions from the Adventurers Guild during the day to familiarize themselves with the Liyue region. At night, they returned to their home in Mondstadt via the teleport waypoints. During this time, they finally encountered Fiscal and Ounce, who came to check if Nolan had returned. Fiscal was naturally delighted to see him after several days apart. Over dinner, Nolan shared some of his experiences in Liyue Harbor. As for bedtime, they spent the night together, expressing their love and alleviating their longing for each other. 2 days passed like this. Besides completing commissions and earning over 100,000 mora, Nolan also gained more than 3,000 Adventure EXP. Today was the day Master Zhang said the prototype for the bicycle would be ready. Nolan and the others were eager to check it out since it was crucial for their and Lumen's money-making plans and for Paimon's feast freedom. Chapter 223, Falling Hutao. Liyue Harbor, Hanfan's Ironmonger's blacksmith shop. Nolan and the others greeted Catherine at the Adventurers Guild and then made their way down the wooden steps to the blacksmith shop below. Clang! 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 Master Zhang, with short black hair, was hammering away at a red-hot, softened iron ingot. Without stopping his work, he glanced up at the newcomers and said, "You're here. Let me just finish this sword billet. It won't take long." "Take your time, we're not in a hurry," Paimon said, waving her hands lightly. Lumen nodded in silent agreement. Nolan moved closer to watch Master Zhang work. Having watched Wagner forge weapons many times, he could tell that Master Zhang was making a sword billet for a one-handed sword. If Nolan learned the craft, he thought, he could likely use Adventure EXP to quickly master forging and produce high-quality weapons to sell. Especially with 4-star weapons, which could fetch millions quite profitable without needing to go on adventures. But wait, no. Adventures were still necessary. Without fighting monsters, there would be no Adventure EXP to level up skills. That said, blacksmithing could be as lucrative as adventuring. Even top-tier blacksmiths like Wagner, who could craft 4-star weapons, needed over 10 days for one, which, after subtracting material costs, would bring in 2 to 3 million mora, about 100,000 per day. This was comparable to what a top-tier adventurer like Nolan could earn from a mid-level commission, which offered 10 to 20,000 mora. Considering the additional Adventure EXP gained from adventuring, there was no need to focus solely on blacksmithing. However, it would be worth learning at some point, given that the pinnacle of blacksmithing was crafting the legendary 5-star weapons, a feat few mortals could achieve. Yet, achieving the skill level required to forge a 5-star weapon would demand an enormous amount of Adventure EXPs. It might be more practical to improve himself directly for now. He would consider blacksmithing when he had more Adventure EXP to spare. As Nolan pondered, Master Zhang quickly completed a sword billet. He quenched it briefly in water, then set his tools aside and went inside the shop, returning with a bicycle. Take a good look. I crafted all the parts according to the design and assembled them as instructed. There shouldn't be any issues, Master Zhang said. Though experienced, this was his first time making something so novel, so he couldn't be sure it would match the design's intended function. All right, we'll check it out, Nolan nodded, and he and Lumen inspected the bicycle. It resembled the vintage bicycles from Earth, though it was slightly smaller. The design was pleasing. The handlebars were a simple straight bar with iron hand brakes at the ends. The brake cables were several strands of tough-looking wire twisted together, just like on Earth, though without protective sheaths. The seat seemed to be leather filled with lots of cotton, providing a soft feel. It also had the feature of adjustable height. Additionally, there was a wooden basket on the front and a rear rack capable of carrying a passenger, both practical additions. The only minor drawback was the wooden tires. Let me try it, Lumen said, feeling a sudden interest. Sure, take it for a spin and see how it feels. Nolan nodded. Lumen grasped the bike and gently lifted her leg, gracefully straddling the soft seat. She found it comfortable, with no hard spots pressing against her. Overall, the comfort was satisfactory. With her left foot, clad in over-the-knee white-heeled boots, resting on the ground and her right foot on the pedal, she pushed off lightly, and the bike started moving. The wheels turned, making a sound like a carriage, grug grug grug. It looks fun, Paimon want to ride too. Seeing Lumen riding the bicycle, Paimon's curiosity got the better of her. She flew up and sat on the rear rack, holding onto Lumen's skirt on either side. Haha, how's my craftsmanship? Is it up to standard? Master Zhang asked, slightly surprised to see his creation moving along so smoothly with two people on it. Last night, after assembling the bicycle, he had tried it himself but couldn't get it to move properly and almost fell off a few times. He had even doubted whether he'd made a mistake. But after repeatedly checking the details in the design plans and finding no errors, he finally felt relieved. It looks great. No wonder you're a famous 100-year-old brand from Liyue. Nolan said confidently. After Lumen made a couple of rounds, Nolan also took a quick turn. He found that the thick seat cushion compensated for the rough ride caused by the wooden wheels. After a few more tries, confirming that the bicycle met their requirements, they happily paid the 150,000 more of forging fee. So, now we just need to find a buyer. Paimon, realizing the potential market for this thing called a bicycle, excitedly imagined a future where the traveler would be rich and Mora would be endless. Yeah, but who should we approach? Or should we just ride it around the busy streets and attract the attention of merchants with a keen eye for business? Lumen turned to Nolan, curious about his thoughts. No need for that. Even the most talented merchants can't compare to the Tianquan star, Ningguang, Nolan replied with a smile. Not only was Ningguang wealthy, but she also had power, controlling Liyue's economic development. There was no one more suitable to approach. The Liyue Kixing? But didn't we just suspect her of harming Geo Archon 2 days ago? Paimon asked, puzzled, with her hands behind her back. Hey, Paimon, you don't seriously believe what that Liyue Harbinger said, do you? If he hadn't given us that all-purpose Adepti Seeker, I wouldn't have even bothered with him, Nolan remarked, wanting to flick Paimon's forehead for being so naive. Yes, the Liyue definitely have some ulterior motive for telling us those things. We can use this business opportunity to observe the Tianquan star and see if she could really be the culprit, Lumen said thoughtfully, crossing her arms and resting her chin on her hand. Okay, but can we easily meet such an important person? Paimon asked, realizing she might have been influenced by child's speculations. In any case, let's start by asking at the Ministry of Civil Affairs, Nolan suggested. Nolan knew that meeting Ningguang wouldn't be easy, but the Ministry of Civil Affairs would definitely have a way to contact her. Liyue Harbor. Nolan sped through the crowded streets on the bicycle, with Lumen sitting upright on the rear rack, her legs together. The fast-moving air lifted her white skirt from below. From bottom to top. Her snow-white thighs and lantern shorts were slightly exposed. To prevent her skirt from flying up, Lumen had to hold onto Nolan's waist with her right hand and press down on the skirt with her left hand. Wow, this is so fast. It's so much more comfortable than flying myself. Let's go. Paimon cheered excitedly. Her small and light frame made it perfect for her to sit on the front basket without causing much strain. A novel, two-wheeled vehicle that could carry people drew frequent glances from pedestrians on the street. What is this thing? It can carry 2 people without having to touch the ground? It looks incredibly convenient. This was the inevitable thought that crossed the minds of those who saw the bicycle. It's easy to predict that once bicycles can be mass-produced and sold, they won't have trouble finding buyers. Nolan felt very happy as well because riding this bicycle brought back memories of riding to school years ago. It was truly nostalgic. Be careful, don't ride so fast. Watch out for people. Lumen said, her golden hair fluttering wildly in the wind. The sensation of it touching her eyes was somewhat uncomfortable, so she had no choice but to press her face against Nolan's back. She also gently reminded him with her slightly parted lips. Okay, I got it. Nolan responded casually, though he didn't slow down on the pedals. Wangshu Funeral Parlor. Without any work to do, Hu Tao lay on the roof tiles, staring at the sun, trying to spot the vague black spot she had seen before. Unfortunately, such black spots didn't often appear on the surface of the sun. She thought with a slight hint of disappointment. Archon inexplicably met his demise, and now everyone on the streets looks so sorrowful. I hope everyone can move past this sadness soon. Hu Tao propped herself up, adjusted the slightly crooked Kyunkantei hat on her head, and gazed down at the people in the street below. By the way, I wonder if Wangshu Funeral Parlor will get the chance to handle the Lord's funeral. Oh, no, the Lord is a deity, it should be called the Immortal Farewell Ceremony. But we haven't yet investigated the truth behind the Lord's demise. The Liyue Kixing probably won't have time for this right now. As she was thinking this, she suddenly saw a 2-wheeled vehicle speeding down the street. Hu Tao raised her eyebrows, her plum blossom-like pupils reflecting a thoughtful expression. Wheels like a carriage, and it can carry 2 people. What a amazing thing. An interested expression appeared on her fair face. Hey! Hu Tao chuckled lightly, stood up, and jumped directly down from the roof. Nolan saw a figure suddenly jump out in front of them and quickly grabbed both side brakes. The rolling wooden wheels came to an immediate halt. However, even with special treatments to increase friction, the wooden tires took about a meter to stop from high speed. In ordinary circumstances, this would be acceptable, but suddenly encountering a person at such a speed could be dangerous. Wow, stop quickly or we'll crash into her. Paimon, in a panic, forgot that she could fly and could have avoided the collision in advance. The next second, the bicycle came to an abrupt stop. Paimon, who was sitting in the front basket, was thrown off and then landed back down as if she had collided with something soft. Hu Tao, while holding onto the front of the bicycle to stop it, patted her clothes on her small belly and smiled. Hehe, sorry for suddenly stopping you, but this vehicle of yours looks so interesting that I wanted to learn more about it. I also want one. Nolan looked at the girl who had stopped them. She wore a round hat with red plum blossoms on the sides, and beneath it flowed her red-brown twin-tailed long hair. Her fair face had a touch of playful charm. She wore a robe with Liyue-style patterns and a long back, colored similarly to her hair. Her eyes were as beautiful as a plum blossom. She wore black shorts, and her snow-white, soft legs were exposed. On her feet were short socks adorned with plum blossoms and small brown shoes. Hu Tao. A name immediately sprang to Nolan's mind. In the game's plot, Nolan learned that she was a girl who was a bit whimsical and liked to play pranks. No wonder she suddenly appeared to stop them. And you are? Lumen got off the rear rack, put her hands on her hips, and looked at her with amber eyes, somewhat displeased. Doesn't she realize how dangerous that was? They almost crashed into her. I am Hu Tao, the head of Wangshu Funeral Parlor. Hu Tao retracted her right hand, which had extended from her sleeve and was painted with black nail polish. She patted her slightly rising chest and smiled as if she hadn't noticed Lumen's displeasure. Well, Miss Hu Tao, this bicycle was designed by us, and there is only one for now. If you want one, please wait a while, it will be mass-produced in the future. Nolan was quite willing to explain to Hu Tao. Ah, so it's not available for purchase right now. Hu Tao crossed her arms, with her wide sleeves draping over her small belly. Her face first showed a bit of disappointment, then she continued to look at the bicycle. Hehe, how about you sell me this bicycle? Encountering such an interesting thing, she didn't want to give up easily. This isn't possible. We need to take it to negotiate with Lady Ningguang. Paimon rejected Hu Tao's idea, which affected her free meals. Negotiating with Ningguang? I see. This is something I'm quite good at. How about I accompany you, and after the deal is done, you can let me play with the bicycle for a couple of days. Hu Tao insisted. Chapter 224, Encounter with Keqing at the Ministry of Civil Affairs. Nolan and the others quickly realized just how persistent Hu Tao could be. She was adamant about borrowing the bicycle for a while, clearly not giving up until she got her way. Nolan thought it over. Since the bicycle was only needed for the negotiation with Ningguang, there was no harm in letting Hu Tao borrow it for a while. It could also be beneficial to befriend this quirky head of the Wangshu funeral parlor. All right, Nolan agreed, after checking with Lumen, who had no objections. Wow, you guys are so nice, Hu Tao said, casually patting Nolan and Lumen on the shoulders as if they were old friends. Hu Tao has developed good feelings towards you, obtained 190 affection points. Current affection level, LV.2, 90/200. Lumen sighed slightly, feeling a bit exasperated. This was her first time encountering someone so quirky and persistent. Hehe, alright then, I'll take you to find Ningguang right away. Hu Tao turned and started walking in the opposite direction from where they came, waving for them to follow. Wait, isn't the Ministry of Civil Affairs in the other direction? Paimon asked, hovering in the air with a puzzled expression. You've been in Liyue long enough to see that building floating near Mt Tianheng outside Liyue Harbor, right? That's Ningguang's private palace, the Jade Chamber. If you want to find her, we just need to find a way to fly up there. Hu Tao stopped and turned around to explain. Ahem, I think it's best not to do something that might be misunderstood, Nolan suggested. He had thought about this method too. With his and Lumen's abilities, they could use wind gliders and gather wind elements to lift themselves up to the Jade Chamber. However, doing so without permission would be impolite, as it was Ningguang's private residence. While Hu Tao might not care about formalities, they, as outsiders, felt it was inappropriate. Ugh, fine, how troublesome, Hu Tao grumbled. Though she was quirky, playful and a bit unpredictable, she was also smart and open-minded. She understood everything clearly and wasn't bound by rigid rules. She always showed her true self, as she did now, voicing her annoyance despite understanding the situation. You speak so bluntly. Paimon commented. The ancients said, think thrice before acting, but if you overthink everything, it just becomes too much of a headache, Hu Tao remarked, walking alongside Nolan and the others towards the Ministry of Civil Affairs. Her long, reddish-brown robe swayed gently, occasionally brushing against her pale legs. So, you said you're the head of the Wangshu funeral parlor. What kind of work do you do? Lumen asked, feeling that, despite Hu Tao's persistent nature, she wasn't all that bad. Curious about this eccentric girl, Lumen asked the question to learn more about her. Wangshu funeral parlor, as the name suggests, is all about sending people to the afterlife, Hu Tao replied, her hands clasped behind her back as she walked with a spring in her step. Her pale lips curved into a mischievous smile, and she spoke with a spooky tone. What? Is it an assassin organization? Paimon gasped, covering her mouth with her tiny fists and quickly darting away from Hu Tao. Lumen looked at her with a puzzled expression. Hu Tao didn't seem like someone from an assassin organization. By sending people to the afterlife, she probably means conducting funerals for the deceased, Nolan interjected, seeing through Hu Tao's prank. I mean, assassins don't usually walk around openly in the streets. Hu Tao's words weren't exactly lies, she just deliberately left out details, steering others' thoughts in a darker direction. Hehe, you're pretty sharp. Hu Tao chuckled, realizing Nolan's familiarity with Liyue's culture. Phew, so that's it. Don't joke around like that next time. Paimon, having almost fallen for the prank, was a bit embarrassed and glared at Hu Tao. Alright, enough about that. Before we reach the Ministry of Civil Affairs, why don't you teach me how to ride this bicycle? Hu Tao said, pushing aside Nolan, who was guiding the bicycle, and clambering onto it as if they were old friends. She wasn't shy about it at all. Sure, it's all about balancing. It's not too hard, Nolan replied, relaxing his neck and nodding. Ministry of Civil Affairs. Keqing had just finished reviewing the reports on the Geo-Archon's unexpected death and left the Ministry of Civil Affairs. The numerous inconsistencies troubled her. How could the powerful Geo-Archon be suddenly killed? And who could have managed to ambush him? There were no signs before the incident, and no suspicious individuals had been found. How could this happen? Keqing felt deeply troubled, wanting to uncover the truth behind the Archon's death but with no leads to follow. Whoa. Watch out! Move aside, I can't control this. A voice suddenly called out from her right, interrupting her thoughts as she descended the steps. She turned her head and saw the enigmatic head of the Wangshu funeral parlor causing chaos again. Hu Tao was riding some two-wheeled contraption, careening through the street. Pedestrians quickly dodged, causing chaos along the way. Seeing this, Keqing felt her blood pressure rise. Gritting her teeth, a spark of electricity flickered across her body as she disappeared from sight. Grab the brakes, you idiot! Paimon shouted, flying beside Hu Tao to remind her. Hu Tao, with her quick learning ability, had picked up how to ride the bicycle after a couple of lessons from Nolan. Then she insisted on trying it on her own. In the end, Hu Tao got more excited and sped up, completely forgetting to use the hand brakes. She raced down the street, causing significant trouble for everyone. Paimon had to remind her. Oh, right. Almost forgot. Hu Tao exclaimed, just as she reached for the hand brakes. But at that moment, it felt like the speeding bicycle was suddenly stopped by an invisible force. Before Hu Tao's pale fingers could reach the brakes, the bike lifted from the rear, launching her like a projectile. Hu Tao somersaulted through the air, passing over Keqing, and landed hard on her backside. Ouch! Hu Tao winced, placing her hands under her rear to avoid further contact with the hard ground, temporarily staying down. Nolan and Lumen, who had walked up, couldn't help but laugh at the sight. It served her right for always acting so carefree. Behaving so recklessly in the street. What kind of conduct is this? Keqing scolded, turning her annoyance on Hu Tao after curiously examining the bicycle she'd stopped. Hee. Hu Tao dusted off her black shorts and playfully winked and stuck her tongue out at the girl in front of her. Nolan, Lumen and Paimon noticed how the young girl's face, framed by her cat-ear twin tails, darkened like a stormy sky. Hu Tao, you little... Keqing gritted her teeth, raising her right hand clad in a purple glove. Sparks of lightning crackled like an agitated cat's fur. Ah! The Yuheng star is going to hit me. Hu Tao panicked and quickly hid behind Nolan and Lumen, using them as a shield. Sorry, this is all a misunderstanding, Nolan quickly explained, feeling Keqing's piercing gaze. He wasted no time throwing Hu Tao under the bus. We were actually on our way to discuss business with the Tianquan Star, using this new, convenient transportation tool we developed. But we encountered this girl who insisted on riding it, leading to this situation. Humph! Keqing huffed. The people of Liyue Harbor were well aware of the playful and unruly nature of the Wangshu funeral parlor's director. Fortunately, she usually knew her limits and didn't cause significant trouble. I'll let it go this time. But if there's a next time, I'll make you experience the real meaning of Wangshu, afterlife. With that, she extinguished the crackling electricity in her hand and prepared to leave. Hey, wait a minute. Hu Tao hurriedly ran ahead to stop Keqing, not seeming to mind her previous outburst. I'm actually here on business today. This cat-eared, twin-tailed girl was indeed Yuheng, one of the Liyue Kixing. If they could get her to introduce them, it should be easy to meet Ning Guang. What business? Keqing crossed her arms under her chest, covered in a light-colored undershirt, frowning slightly. She was curious about what this mischievous girl was up to now. You heard it earlier, right? We're here to discuss business with Ning Guang. Since we happened to run into the famous Yuheng, could you please introduce us? Hu Tao clasped her hands together in a pleading gesture. She had already enjoyed the fun of riding the bicycle and was willing to go all out to help Nolan and the others meet Ning Guang, hoping to borrow the bike for a few more days. Why don't you just go on your own? Keqing wasn't particularly eager to meet Ning Guang, as their governance philosophies often clashed. Yuheng, we've recently noticed some individuals who might try to stir up trouble in Liyue during this special period. I think it's necessary to discuss this with you and Tianquan, Nolan interjected, hoping to persuade Keqing to facilitate their meeting with Ningguang, which would undoubtedly make things easier. Having seen the game's storyline, Nolan knew the Liyue Kixing weren't villains. Sharing some information about potential troublemakers in a reasonable way could earn their goodwill. Keqing looked at Nolan and the others with serious expressions and remained silent for a moment. As one of the highest authorities in Liyue, she had seen her fair share of schemes and could usually tell if someone was lying. "All right, follow me," she finally agreed. Liyue Harbor, Jade Chamber. With Keqing's introduction, Nolan and the others easily made their way here, flying with the help of wind gliders and harnessing wind elements. "Is Ningguang here?" Keqing, her legs wrapped in black tights with light gold patterns, walked to the front of the Jade Chamber's main entrance and asked the Millelith guards on duty. "Welcome, Lady Keqing." "Yes, Lady Ningguang is inside, but who are these guests?" The young Millelith guard, Zhenhai, looked curiously at Nolan and the others. "Hehe, we're here to discuss business with Tianquan Ningguang," Paimon replied with a smile. "Business? Well, congratulations on getting Lady Keqing to introduce you. You know, there are countless big merchants in all of Liyue who wish to meet Lady Ningguang, just for a single piece of advice, and yet they can't get the chance," Zhenhai remarked with a hint of envy. Then, he helped them open the door to the Jade Chamber. "All right, let's go in and see Ningguang," Keqing said, not bothering to explain further as she urged Nolan and the others to move quickly. She was more concerned about the potential threat to Liyue's safety that Nolan had mentioned than whatever business they were here for. "Ah, Lady Yuheng is as decisive as ever," Hu Tao remarked, spreading her hands as she watched Keqing enter first. Nolan and the others followed Keqing inside the Jade Chamber. On either side was a circular corridor, with an octagonal platform ahead and a wooden spiral staircase winding down to the right. "Lady Keqing, what brings you here?" Bai Shi, the Jade Chamber's secretary, who was cleaning the floor in a dress, noticed the visitors immediately and came over to assist. "Bai Shi, it's you. Please take us to see Ningguang," Keqing said, nodding slightly and resting her arms naturally at her sides. "Sure, Lady Ningguang is in her office," Bai Shi responded, setting aside her broom and leading the way. Soon, Nolan and the others descended the spiral staircase and arrived at the office of Tianquan Ningguang, guided by the secretary of the Jade Chamber. The room was spacious, with bright sunlight streaming through the patterned windows on the right. Sitting behind a long desk, Ningguang, whom they had seen recently at Yujing Terrace, was perusing a scroll. Hearing footsteps, she looked up slightly. "Lady Yuheng, what brings you to my Jade Chamber?" Ningguang, with her gloved hand resting against her chin, looked at her with mild surprise. "It's not me, these people have some information they want to share with you," Keqing replied, shaking her head and directing her gaze toward Nolan and the others. The two honorary knights from Mondstadt and their little fairy companion, along with the head of the Wangsheng funeral parlor. "Now, that's an unusual combination," Ningguang remarked with a light laugh as she stepped forward, her high heels clicking softly. "Hehe, hello, Ningguang." Hu Tao greeted with a wave, her wide reddish-brown sleeves slipping slightly to reveal a pale arm. Nolan, Lumen and Paimon also greeted her. Not wasting any time, Nolan began to explain the situation, including what Child had asked them to do and the Fachui's actions in Mondstadt, where they had stolen the Inmo Archon's Gnosis. Chapter 225, 50. On a sun-drenched afternoon, Keqing and Ningguang, two of the Liyue Kixing, quietly listened to Nolan's account. Before long, Nolan had succinctly recounted the misdeeds of the Fachui in Mondstadt. "So that's how it is. The Fachui are collecting Gnosis. If that's the case, they are likely the culprits," Ningguang said, musing over the information. However, merely suspecting without evidence seemed meaningless, as they couldn't confront the Fachui based solely on Nolan's word. Damn it, they even want to sow discord between the Kixing and the Adepti. Keqing's pale and delicate face showed anger. As a more radical reformist, she wasn't particularly fond of the Adepti, who lived in the mountains yet still influenced Liyue. However, she knew that transitioning Liyue to being entirely governed by humans would require waiting for the right time and proceeding gradually. Change couldn't be forced through violence. The Fachui were clearly up to no good. While the Kixing had been very wary of them, it was still surprising to learn they were involved in such actions. Seeing that Ningguang and Keqing suspected the Fachui of being the culprits behind the Archon's death, Nolan didn't add much. Though not the absolute truth, the Fachui would indeed play a significant role in the upcoming events, even releasing the sealed ancient god. However, All of this was within the Geo-Archon's control, as he had orchestrated these events. Whether the situation would develop as expected after Nolan's warning to Ningguang remained uncertain. Ultimately, the initiative lay with the Geo-Archon, and the necessary events would happen regardless of any complications. Yes, we will make sure to protect the Archon's immortal body carefully. Thank you for informing us about such an important matter. Ningguang nodded, expressing her gratitude to Nolan and the others. Ningguang has developed good feelings towards you. Obtain 330 affection points. Current affection level, LV.3, 30/300. Humph. I will also make sure to find evidence of the Fachui's involvement in the Archon's assassination. Keqing added determinedly. Keqing has developed good feelings towards you. Obtain 300 affection points. Current affection level, LV.3, 0/300. The notifications on Nolan's character panel made him feel that the trip had been worthwhile. Who would have thought there'd be so much behind the Archon's death? I just assumed he had reached the end of his lifespan after living for so long, Hu Tao remarked with a sigh. If it were just these matters, you could have told Keqing. There's no need to come to the Jade Chamber for that, so you must have other business with me, Ningguang said, pausing her contemplation on how to handle the potential Fachui crisis. Her crimson eyes continued to gaze at Nolan and the others, prompting them. Indeed, Nolan nodded slightly and then turned his gaze to Hu Tao. Hu Tao, understanding the cue, summoned the bicycle from her vision and placed it in front of Ningguang. She grinned and asked, Hee, Ningguang, can you guess what this is? You want me to guess? Ningguang crossed her arms and chuckled. Judging by its structure, it appears to be some sort of new vehicle. Is this why you've come to see me? Yes, we call this vehicle a bicycle. It allows one person to ride while carrying another. I'm sure you can see how convenient this could be for people's travel needs, Nolan explained, detailing the bicycle's functionality and potential applications. Oh, it seems this bicycle indeed has a broad market potential, Ningguang noted, her expression becoming more serious. So, are you looking for me to invest in mass production? Considering they'd shared crucial information about the Fachui possibly stealing Gnosis, Ningguang thought that if they needed investment, she would be willing to help out, not just as thanks but also because the bicycle had investment value. No, while we've designed this vehicle, we lack experience in running a business or a factory. Rather than risk failure, we'd prefer to sell the design to someone more capable, like yourself, Lady Tianquan. Nolan and Lumen expressed their intention to sell the design to Ningguang. If that's your plan, that's fine. However, I'll need the design blueprints first. I want to have a few bicycles made and tested before determining their actual value. Is that acceptable? Ningguang's request for the blueprints was not an attempt to take advantage but rather a sign of her seriousness. To set a fair price, she needed to understand the costs, user experience, and market demand. Of course, we trust you, Lady Tianquan. If we can't trust you, then there's no one we can trust in Liyue, Nolan said, handing over the design blueprints and complimenting her. As a renowned merchant in a nation known for its contracts, Ningguang wouldn't have risen to the esteemed position of Tianquan by using deceitful means. You may not know business, but you sure know how to flatter, Ningguang remarked, taking the blueprints with a faint smile on her fair face. Ningguang has developed good feelings towards you, obtained 120 affection points. Current affection level, LV.3, 150/300. Since you've sealed the deal, I'll take the bicycle as agreed for a few days. Hu Tao eagerly reclaimed the bicycle into her vision, earning disapproving looks from Lumen and Paimon. If there's nothing else, I'll be on my way, Keqing said, turning briskly to leave. Her twin tails and the feather-like ribbons on her split sleeves fluttered behind her as she walked out. She was off to investigate the Fachui. If Keqing truly discovers that the Fachui were responsible for the death of the Geo-Archon, then a conflict with the Fachui and Snezhnia would be unavoidable. This matter concerns the reputation of Liyue. With their business with Ningguang concluded, Nolan and his group were also ready to leave. Ningguang would send someone to contact them about the bicycle after completing all the necessary tests. By the way, since you're planning to visit the Adepti tomorrow, could you deliver a letter for me to avoid any misunderstandings? Ningguang asked. Even though Liyue could stand on its own without the Adepti, there was no need to unnecessarily offend them and create potential enemies. Of course, we'd be happy to, Paimon replied with a smile, conveying the thoughts of Nolan and Lumen. Liyue Harbor. As Nolan and Lumen emerged from the teleport waypoint and arrived near the area, they saw Xingqiu and Kong Gaiun waiting there. "Morning, everyone." Paimon waved in greeting. "Good morning. I assume you've already prepared the supplies for the adventure." Xingqiu jumped down from a stone pedestal and brushed the dust off his clothes with a smile. "Don't worry, we're professionals in this regard," Lumen replied with a smile on her fair face. "Absolutely," Nolan agreed, nodding. "By the way, we've been taking commissions around Liyue Harbor and exploring the area, but we're not familiar with the route to Mta, so we'll rely on you two to guide us." Kong Gaiun often exorcises demons in the wild, so he's quite familiar with the area, Xingqiu said, patting his friend's shoulder. "Yes, we studied the map of Liyue last night and have planned a route to Mta, Kong Gaiun replied, nodding slightly. He then shared his thoughts. "Originally, we planned to follow the main road through Gailai Plains and Qihu Slope to reach Chueun Karst, and then cross over King Yun Peak to arrive at Mta. However, this route would take an extra half-day compared to another option." "Another option?" Paimon tilted her head in confusion. "Yes, we could instead take the main road past Liyue Harbor, passing through Tianheng Mountain, Tianqiu Valley and Nantianmen, straight to Mta, Xingqiu explained. "Would this route be much faster?" Nolan asked, curious. Xingqiu smiled and replied, "If we were walking, it would actually take longer due to the rugged terrain after reaching the Dunya ruins, which is filled with mountains. However, because of the highlands, we can use wind gliders to travel, making the journey much shorter, about 10 days. Nolan nodded in agreement. He often used wind gliders during his adventures, as they were faster than walking or running and didn't drain energy as quickly, allowing for longer periods of travel. Lumen thought for a moment and then said, "Since both Nolan and I can use Anmo, we could use it to assist in flying, which would make us even faster." "You can both use Anmo? That's great," Kong Gaiun said, slightly surprised. He hadn't noticed a vision on either Nolan or Lumen but didn't doubt their claim. "Hehe, since we've prepared the supplies and mapped out our route, let's head out." Paimon exclaimed excitedly as she hovered in mid-air. "Yes," Xingqiu and Kong Gaiun replied, taking the lead while Nolan and Lumen followed closely behind, all moving in a line as they set off. Tianheng Mountain. The bright morning sun shone on the group as they made their way up the mountain. To achieve greater distance while gliding, they needed to reach a high point. However, Tianheng Mountain was quite tall, so Nolan and Lumen couldn't use Anmo to directly carry everyone up. Instead, they used wind currents to assist them up the steeper parts and walk the flatter sections. By combining these methods, they reached the summit of Tianheng Mountain in about an hour. "Wow, you can see all of Liyue Harbor from here!" Paimon exclaimed, slightly exhausted but captivated by the view below. From their vantage point, they could see the bustling Liyue Harbor. The streets and alleys were indistinguishable, making the city look like a sea of buildings slightly sloping downward. "If you come at night, when the city lights up, the view is even more beautiful," Xingqiu remarked. He had once visited this spot specifically to see Liyue Harbor at night and was so struck by the city's beauty that he incorporated it into his writings. "Maybe we'll do that another time." "Which direction are we flying now?" Nolan asked, seeming less surprised by the sight, likely because he had seen it frequently in the game. "Let me check the map." Kong Gaiun pulled out a rolled-up map of Liyue from his vision and studied it closely. "We're on Tianheng Mountain now, so we should fly north." "All right, let's go," Nolan agreed. After a short rest, they all spread their wind gliders and flew north. Throughout the flight, Nolan and Lumen occasionally used Anmo to give the group a boost, helping them fly faster. By midday, they had to land and take a break. After flying non-stop from Tianheng Mountain over to Dunya ruins, Nolan and his companions landed and found a ruin filled with hilly churls. They cleared out the area of these monsters to use it as a temporary rest spot. Nolan was quite enthusiastic about fighting monsters. When he noticed that this group of hilly churls was only around level 40 on average, he stopped the others from intervening, saying he wanted to test his skills. He activated his elemental skill, Dandelion Shield. Surrounded by a swirling wind, he charged into the group of monsters and used Wind Blade, a technique he had learned from acting Grandmaster Jean. The nearby small hilly churls were swept up and tossed off a cliff, dealing Anmo damage and additional fall damage, easily ending their lives. During the fight, 2 hilly churl berserkers tried to stop him, but even without actively dealing with them, his spinning wind shield effortlessly knocked them away. Nolan also experimented with his spiritual threads on the two berserkers. These could easily trip them and, with their mental attack, cause a moment of confusion. In the end, he finished them off with a couple of casual sword strikes. After this battle, Nolan gained over 5,000 Adventure EXP, pushing his total Adventure EXP past 10,000. Adventure EXP, 10,553. Initially, he planned to upgrade his concealment form skill, but seeing that he was just 2 levels away from reaching level 50, he decided to level up instead. Reaching level 50 would allow him to unlock another racial trait, which piqued his curiosity. Filled with anticipation, Nolan and his team cleaned up the battlefield and prepared to set up camp and cook a meal. While they were doing this, he allocated most of his Adventure EXP to level up. Adventure EXP, minus 9,700. LV 48, 0/4,800, LV 50, 0/5,000. Your level has been raised to LV.50, your evolution has reached a new stage, and you can obtain a racial specialty, please choose.
Additionally, if you would like to request novels and access my Google Drive where I have 200+ audiobooks, then you can join my Patreon, link is also provided in the description.